Hey guys, a little darker. If winding down with history helps you drift, do feel free to like and subscribe so the next story finds you while you're already comfortable. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 78 CE in Pompeii under a sky that hangs low with stars. Dim the lights, settle back, and if you have one, set a fan for a soft background hum to smooth the edges of thought. The night is warm and steady. The streets still hold the day's heat like a kept promise. You lift a small oil lamp, and the flame makes a mellow circle on lime-washed walls. The air tastes faintly of smoke and olives. There's a salt note from the bay that feels cool on the tongue. Luxury, if you don't mind the occasional ash fleck on your sandals. A narrow lane invites you onward. Paving stones shine like worn bone beneath the lamp. Wheel ruts run in twin grooves, practical as a rulebook. Wooden balconies lean slightly above, their shadows stitching a simple pattern across the street. A dog turns, sighs, and returns to its private dreams. From a tiny shrine set in plaster, little painted household gods raise their hands as if to bless passers-by. Someone has wrapped a sprig of laurel with a red thread and left it there. The thread clicks faintly against the wall whenever the breeze remembers to visit. The city is polite. It nods as you pass. You reach a corner fountain shaped with a lion's head. Water slips from the stone mouth into a basin rubbed, satin smooth by cups and hands. The sound is gentle and even. You dip your fingers and let coolness climb your wrist. The lamplight breaks into ribbons on the surface, gathers again, and drifts on. It feels unhurried, as if the fountain keeps time for the neighborhood. A decent job for a lion that bites only water. Up the lane, a glow breathes, fades, and gathers. The air thickens with a comforting smell. Baked grain, wood smoke, something sweet at the edge of it. A bakery. The door is wedged open, and a spill of yellow light dusts the threshold. Inside, the great oven idles like a tame animal, heat still rolling from its arched mouth. Loaves cool on a shelf, round and scored into quarters. Their geometry is tidy, like a habit that has proved itself. A woman with flour on her arms stacks paddles, brushes flour from the flags, and hangs a cloth from a peg to dry. She gives you the small smile of a person who has finished the day properly. You breathe in the last of the bread's warmth and feel your shoulders untie. It is oddly satisfying to be welcomed by a craft you didn't do. Back in the street, the stars have leaned closer. Stepping stones stand out across the broader road like a string of low islands. They keep your feet dry when rain comes and mark the crossing with a practical grace. A wall nearby carries a scratched exchange, a joke, and its answer, shallow in the plaster. Lovers, neighbors, rivals, everyone writes a little history while the city isn't looking. You touch the faint burr of the letters with a fingertip. The words are nobody important, and therefore perfect. On the corner, a thermopolium holds its night calm. The counter is set with round clay jars sunken into stone. A thread of steam climbs from one jar and curls away. The proprietor wipes the lip with a rag, tips his head, and raises a ladle as a quiet question. You nod. He pours a small bowl of something modest, barley, lentils, a leaf or two, and places a flat of bread alongside. The taste is simple and clean. It belongs to the hour, and that's enough. The doorway keeps 3 little bronze bells on a leather thong. They tinkle when the air remembers it can move. They may not ring at all. Memory sometimes supplies them out of kindness. Either way, the moment lands softly. Good night, he says. Half blessing, half farewell. You leave the last heel of bread for morning birds and step out again. The houses along the stretch wear color in the dark, the way people wear manners, easily, without show. A dull crimson here, a pale yellow there, a blue so deep it pretends to be black. One threshold is set with a mosaic, a black dog with white teeth and a chain, suggested with a few spare cubes. The dog will watch forever, bright-nosed and alert. Real dogs have fewer duties. One snuffles behind a shutter and lets the world get on with it. You cross into a small peristyle garden open to the night. A fig tree spreads its hands and the air is cooler. Moonlight gathers in the cistern like watered milk. A room opens onto the colonnade. Inside, a couch carries the peaceful geometry of sleep. On a small table, a lamp has been trimmed close and burns as a petal of light. You don't go in. It is enough to know that rooms like this keep company with the darkness, and that both are content. Some houses are simply good at being quiet. The street opens towards the west, and the sea tells on itself with a faint, even mutter. Moorings creak like old furniture settling. Nets hang to dry, their knots beaded with dew. A fisherman sits on a low wall with a cloak pulled around his shoulders and a cap dropped over one eye. His boat rocks behind him as a shadow among shadows. He glances at you and doesn't bother with surprise. The city admits night walkers as a matter of course. Everyone pretends not to see, which passes for courtesy at this hour. You loop back inland and pause at a workshop with shutters left just ajar. Amphorae lie on their sides like a small herd asleep, necks raised, bellies cradled by wicker rings. The air holds a savory thread. Fish sauce finishing its slow work, olive oil settling its thoughts, wine deciding whether to behave. A cart rests outside with dust powdered along its spokes. A single grape stem clings to a basket rim, the faintest green note in a quiet palate. It's hardly a detail. It's exactly a detail. The day leaves its chalk marks. The night wipes them gently. A bell sounds once from a small shrine up the street. 2 columns frame the doorway. A painted wreath sits on the lintel. Smoke lifts from a shallow dish and turns the air warm and fragrant in the plain way of clay and fire. You leave the lamp on the step and stand at the threshold. Inside, a little statue keeps its Roman composure, human in outline, slightly beyond impatience. There is nothing to ask for and nothing to prove. The room lends you the kind of steadiness that doesn't make a speech about itself. You walk on, and a painted wall keeps you company. Vines, birds, a garden that competes with the idea of one. A bench runs along beneath the scene, and you sit. The stone remembers the day's heat and offers you the last of it. 2 voices pass and drift away. A latch clicks, somewhere like a pebble tapped by a ring. A single laugh rolls across a yard and settles. The city speaks a low language at this hour, and you learn it by listening. Your lamp has burned lower. Its pool of light narrows into a neat oval. You draw it closer, and the shadows fold neatly in the corners. You think of the baker's shelf, of the lion fountain soft and logic, of a room where moonlight sits like milk, of nets strung like cobwebs between poles, of amphorae asleep like animals, of a shrine that asks only for attention. The city has offered you its ordinary treasury. You find that ordinary is precisely what you wanted. When you rise, your legs are easy and the street is familiar in the way a face is after you've watched it resting. You turn the corner, you turn to before, and the little laurel thread taps the plaster as if to recognize you. The dog behind the shutter sighs again, content to share the night without fuss. The mountain waits as only a mountain can, large and self-possessed, part of the sky rather than a problem in it. Your lamp gives one steady blink of courage. You walk on, unhurried. The city keeps pace as if matching your breath. There is nothing ahead that demands you, and nothing behind that chases. You feel the night hold, even as the first hint of a paler east thinks about forming. Pompeii is asleep but not absent. You are awake but not busy. It turns out that's an admirable arrangement. Before you turn towards the next street, you let your eyes rest where they have already been. The fountain, the thermopolium, the garden, the workshop, the shrine. Each place keeps its part in the hour. The night doesn't need to raise its voice to be believed. It speaks in a loaf cooling, a thread of smoke, a bowl set ready for morning birds. That's quite enough to go on. You take one more step, then another, and the rhythm becomes simple again. Street, wall, lamp, breath. Nothing more to carry, nothing more to drop. The city breathes with you. The night has you well in hand. The hour settles into its proper shape, and the city seems to breathe with you. You carry the lamp lightly, and it answers with the same small patience every time your wrist tilts. The mountain keeps its quiet outline. The bay, its quiet murmur. By now, your steps have fallen into a pace that belongs to the streets more than to you. This is a good sign. It means the place has lent you its rhythm. Later tonight, we step into St. Petersburg, a quiet ceremony that makes a girl named Sophie into Catherine, and end beneath a red-dusted tomb in the Maya world. For now, we remain with Pompeii, and we keep our voice low so that sleepers are not drafted into our curiosity. The thoroughfare opens a little, not yet the Forum, but a street that knows how to lead there. Shops nap with shutters drawn to the last inch. A tethered cart is balanced with a brick behind one wheel. Its spokes wear a light scum of day dust, and the modest pride of work done. A cat hops onto the cart, folds all 4 paws neatly under itself, and pretends to be marble. It blinks once at your lamp. It has judged you safe, which is as close to an honor as cats like to offer. At the corner, a painted notice advertises games that have already been held. The red letters shout cheerfully, even in the dark. Beneath it, someone has written a tiny poem in a hand that cares more for feeling than for shape. You can make out enough of it to catch the point. Love has borrowed a cloak and pretended to be a god. The idea has not gone out of date. You reach the edge of the forum as a breeze runs a hand over the square. It is a wide, even space, and at this hour, it sheds its noise and stands in its best clothes. Porticos receive the moon along their tops. Columns keep the long, slow rhythm of their shadows. A statue looks out over the emptiness with a public calm that never quite notices one person. The stones under your sandals hold the warmth of the afternoon lower than the warmth of the evening, and your step reads the difference with satisfaction. A practical fellow. The stone floor. You pass the market buildings with a kind of companionable courtesy, as though you don't want to wake the day's chatter out of its well-earned doze. Stalls are empty, cleaned and squared. Hooks hang like tidy punctuation. A single basket rests on its side with a broken reed poking out. It's a minor detail. It behaves like a major one. Order is sweeter when it contains a small, forgivable failure. The basilica is all quiet structure and soft echo. Its walls hold the sense of transactions concluded, scales balanced, bargains sealed with a clasp of hands, arguments cooled in the practical shade. You stand for a moment and let your breath do as it pleases. A space can teach you the manner you should wear in it. This one suggests a straight back and a low voice. It very nearly gets them. Beyond, a little lane returns you to the close weave of houses. A door opens a crack, a sliver of lamp slides across the ground, and a woman passes a small cup to the shadow of another hand. No one hurries. No one explains. The door closes gently. The street accepts the restored scene as though it had always been unbroken. A tavern holds two late figures over a board on which counters sit in a neat mess. They lean forward, eyes half-lidded like men who have both sworn not to care and both care very much indeed. One moves a piece, the other exhales, then laughs under his breath. It is the laughter of a man who has lost a small thing and feels lighter for having put it down. You catch a fragment of talk as you pass, salt prices, mackerel, and file it with the evening's catalogue of ordinary wealth. A city is prosperous when its gossip is dull. The street bends, and the smell of damp brick rises where a narrow passage remembers last week's rain. You place your feet carefully. The stepping stones here are not for show. A tiny snail takes his time near your ankle. He has not been advised about your schedule, and perhaps his is better. You nod to him and carry on. He ignores you with the freedom of a creature perfectly employed. A house front is painted with a little scene of Mercury, neat hat, neat caduceus, eyes that refuse to be taken entirely seriously. He keeps his reputation where a shopkeeper would appreciate it. A god who moves goods along, a god who encourages feet to keep the appointments they have made. His smile knows a thing or two. He gives up none of it. You come upon a door where the threshold mosaic greets you with a cheerful have, as if Latin itself had decided that hospitality was too good to be left to custom alone. Inside the atrium, the impluvium holds a mirror of the sky. A tiny skin of breeze skates across its surface. The household layers stand in their niche with a posture that suggests both dancing and instruction. Someone has put a sprig of rosemary in a cup for them. It will be dry by morning. It works perfectly well while it lasts. In a small rear room, a boy has fallen asleep with a wax tablet face down on his chest. He has the expression of a person who has read as much as he needed and not a line more. A stylus lies an inch from his fingers, as if it had attempted a quiet escape and been permitted to succeed. On the wall nearby, a painting of fruit still looks fresh enough to bruise. The painter has laid a single water drop on a fig that will never roll. You leave the door as you found it and step back into the public dark. The lamps along your way are fewer now, or perhaps you carry them more easily inside your head. The mountain's outline has settled into the sensible, huge patience by which such outlines are best judged. The sea's breath seems closer for being unseen. The quiet is not emptiness. It is what rooms and streets become when their better half is permitted to speak. Turn right, and you fall in with two men in conversation, their sandals saying the same thing as their tongues. Nothing is urgent. They touch quarries, contracts, and the quality of a certain cousin's olive press with an air of complicated affection. You keep a courteous distance and enjoy the professional hum of other people's concerns. You learn more that way than if you asked. A cool draft meets you at the mouth of the bath's outer court. You are tempted, and you follow temptation like a citizen. The porter's corner is dark, the bench empty, the little window shut. Inside, the complex is an orchestra warming down. Heat retired from 100 arguments with water, coolness advancing at a walk rather than a run, echoes tying their sandals. The changing room has its pegs in neat ranks. The benches ask nobody to admire them and are therefore admirable. You can almost hear 1,000 half-remembered jokes hovering high under the ceiling, reluctant to be entirely dismissed. They will come back when morning shuffles its feet at the threshold and allows the day to begin again. The frigidarium is a letter to the skin that never needs to be rewritten, steady, clear, and simple in its subject. The water is still. The ceiling carries the pale ghost of painted panels, where blues and greens have agreed to fade together. A single dripped bead hangs from a corner and refuses to fall in a hurry. You place your palm on the marble lip of the pool, and the stone calmly corrects your temperature and your opinion of your own importance. Marble has had centuries to practice this. It rarely makes a fuss. Through the tepidarium, the air holds a mild, forgiving warmth, as if the room had been designed by someone who understood the human wish for second chances. The hypocaust's heat has a long memory and a tidy afterlife. Oil still scents the imagination. Don't pretend otherwise. And the benches carry a polish that is half labor, half gratitude. You sit for a minute or two and do nothing particularly clever, which suits the architecture. When you emerge, the street has gathered the dark in a way that is complete without being heavy. Somewhere an oven lets out the last soft sigh of cooling brick, and somewhere else, a night insect remembers its part and plays it. You can measure the quarter hours by what returns, a bell once, then another, the stretch of a dog, the whisper of a curtain, the turning of a key that thinks well of itself. The city is a clock when you listen properly. You take the long way home to nowhere in particular. A barber's shop gives you its silhouette, chair, shelf, mirror, and keeps everything else to itself. A dyer's yard holds a faint ghost of purple that is mostly a suggestion. A carpenter's workshop lines up tools in a habit that puts all of them, and the man who arranged them, in a good light. The moon takes the same trouble with everyone, and the result is flattering. You pass under a balcony where a vine has set its leaves against the balustrade as if it had decided to take a formal portrait. Someone has hung laundry on a line beneath, and the linen hangs with the confidence of people who trust weather to behave. The night agrees to respect it. You nod. Good neighbors all round. The lane narrows again and delivers you back to your starting dog, who, without moving, manages to imply that he has supervised your entire tour and found it adequate. You bow to his management and carry on. Pompeii, at this hour, has done what a city should. It has made room for everything ordinary and allowed the ordinary to be perfect. The night wears on without wasting itself. It keeps its shape as well as its calm. You turn towards a quarter where workshops gather like cousins, each with a trade that looks to the others without envy or arrogance. Doors stand shut, yet the character of each room has crept into the street and lingers politely, as if waiting for an introduction. You oblige with a glance. Here, the fuller's place, stout jars, a low trough, a square of paving that takes work without complaint. The air, even at night, retains a faint bite of ammonia dressed up as industry. No one mentions it. Prosperity has an odor of its own, and the city has agreed to call it respectable. Next, a metalworker's stall, quiet as an oath kept. The anvil is a dark, honest shape. Hammers lie at ease, handles oiled, heads scuffed with the proof of days well spent. A ladle the size of a small helmet rests on its side as if listening. A single scale of hammered bronze winks under your lamp and looks pleased with itself, modestly, but not too modestly. You step past a threshold where a sign shows a ship under full sail. The house within smells of resin and rope. Someone's trade has folded the sea and laid it upon their table. The main room opens to a small garden, and a lemon tree has made 3 fruits that shine like promises. They will be discussed at breakfast, weighed with fingers, and saved for a better moment. Waiting, if done properly, is a kind of pleasure. A child's sandal sits disobediently beside a door, its strap looped lazily through a buckle. Somewhere inside, a mother has recently decided not to fetch it. The sandal has won a reprieve and looks like the sort of creature that might use it to grow character. You step around it with the due gravity. The street accepts the drama at face value. Your lamp takes you towards the theater quarter. Stone seats sleep in smooth rows, and the stage, bare and candid, owns its shadows without anxiety. Acoustics, relieved of work, exhale into the open. The sky makes a roof without effort. You stand in the place where voices leap and find they have nothing that needs leaping to. It is a good test, a silence that returns your breath without adding or stealing anything. You say nothing and receive everything you require. Behind the theater, a narrow stair climbs against a wall in a manner that will never be accused of extravagance. You ascend, and the city rises with you. Rooftops interlock like patient hands. Chimneys show where they will put their smoke when called upon. For now, they are only modest obelisks pointing to where the day went. The bay makes a dark crescent, and the far towns keep their own councils, small and complete as a thought nested in a larger one. If a stray laugh travels this far, or a snatch of song, it arrives kindly blurred, like a memory that has remembered to be kind. You go down again, unhurried, and find yourself next to a little shrine to the crossing spirits. It is nothing elaborate, a painted knee, a rusted ring, a smear of burnt offering old enough to be polite. People pass, nod, and carry the favor of it away as if it were a coin palmed by an uncle. Inevitable and a tiny bit cheering. Down a side court lies a stable. The animals snore in their own way. A warm saw through the dark. A rope creaks. A hoof shifts and finds a new version of the ground. Hay carries its sweet dust far more elegantly than it needs to. You are held by the easy engineering of the place. Wood, rope, breath, patience. It has very little to prove and proves all of it. A man crosses the end of the alley with a bucket. He does not look your way. You do not bother him with your eyes. The civility of the hour is to be present without declaring yourself. He pours a little water where the stones have asked for it, and the smell rises cleanly, as if someone had ironed the street. If there is a better definition of neighborliness, it can keep until morning. You take the road that bows gently towards the city's edge, where gardens and small plots begin to show their dark shapes behind low walls. Vines hold trellises with a grip that has the elegance of necessity. The air is cooler here, and the ground keeps secrets about dew, the softness of earth, and the business of root and worm. A fig continues the cautious work of ripening. A rosemary hedge refuses to stop being articulate even at midnight. Nothing calls attention to itself. Everything attends to itself. You develop an envy for this talent and are not ashamed of the feeling. At a gate, an old man sits on a stool, hands slack upon his thighs, head slightly lowered. In that perfect angle between watchfulness and sleep, he knows the difference between being needed and being present. You offer him the smallest nod you can manage without being ungenerous. He replies with a version of the same salute that reminds you he has had longer to practice. Seniority in such matters deserves the acknowledgement it politely refuses to demand. The road narrows into a lane that becomes a path that becomes an idea. The city thins, and the fields confer with the night in a tone that suits both. You stand where a low wall ends, and your lamp, sensing it is not equal to this distance, rests in your palm like a faithful but humble servant. You allow the sky to do the heavy lifting. It is willing. Returning, you pass a doorway where a low murmur threads the dark. Two women share a word and a cup, leaning shoulder to shoulder, body grammar that tells itself. You take in the shape of it and move on, warmed by the knowledge that comfort has many dialects and all of them can be learnt without a book. You let the next corner find you rather than the other way about. The street returns your courtesy with a slight widening and a bench that has not learned how to be uncomfortable. You sit. The city counts your breaths with its own quiet metronome. Drip, creak, rustle, the soft rattle of a cart plank finding its rest for the 100th time. If you listen properly, you can detect where the quarter hours settle. The sound of a bell stitched into a shawl of silence and worn easily by the square. Time behaves better when nobody chases it. You rise because that is what the hour does, and you honor your appointment with it. Where you go next is not so much chosen as recognized. The city, once it has taught you how to walk, does you the kindness of letting you forget you are walking at all. You make for a district where domestic order is done in a quiet key. The front doors are generous without being grand. Thresholds hold little mosaics with greetings that do not overdo themselves. One has the simplest pattern, black, white, black, like a thought that has learned more from practice than from theory. Another depicts a bowl and loaf, so straightforwardly that you feel you have already washed your hands. Inside the first house, the atrium receives the night squarely. The impluvium keeps a shallow domestic sky. The family portraits look out from their wall in a manner that avoids both pride and apology. A lamp near the lararium burns low. Its light teaches the difference between a shrine and a mantelpiece without saying so. A sleeping room holds two beds and the logic of their placement. A blanket lies folded with that particular economy that turns fabric into a sentence. On a shelf, a comb has been cleaned and set down teeth upward, as if a small animal were sunning itself. A necklace, unremarkable but well loved, has been left in a shallow dish. Its clasp points homeward as if it thinks. The longer you stand here, the more you admire the soft art of leaving things at ease. In the kitchen, a pot waits on its ring. The hearth remembers the day and gives no trouble about it. A clay jar of olives has its lid tied with string. The knot is decent rather than showy, and the string knows it. A handful of bay leaves dries inside a net bag near the warmth. A knife has been lain down away from the edge, a decision that will save a thumb in the morning. The little exactnesses stack up and, before you know it, call themselves civilization. Further along, another house offers you a courtyard where a painted garden doubles the real one. A bird with a ridiculous crest stands upon a branch with the smug certainty of creatures who have never had to earn a living. The painter liked birds. It shows. He liked leaves too, and the way green behaves in shadow. He was entirely right to do so. A bench runs the wall and you sit again, because the bench believes in this arrangement. Above, the night sky has lowered as if to rest its elbows upon the roofline. Somewhere an old woman coughs and then stops, satisfied. Somewhere a child turns and releases a little sigh that could persuade armies to put down their arms, at least for the length of it. Somewhere a jar shifts the cupboard's opinion of it and settles an argument that nobody else could hear. The little noises find in their places and agree not to compete. A street vendor's cart, stabled in a covered passage, has a row of cups nested inside one another, each smaller than the last, as if the idea of a cup were trying to return to its childhood. A scale sits beside them. Its pans rest together like friends. A set of weights, brass, darkened, wait patiently for tomorrow's proofs. You could do worse than trust your life to such tidy witnesses. You pause at a wall where a young hand has traced a game grid with a stick. The lines are straight enough to show care and crooked enough to prove a boy's pleasure in making them. Here, a pebble waits to be moved. Here another is set like a small intention. A city earns its tenderness by preserving such nothing in particulars. You feel the cost of it. Always a little work, always a little luck, and resolve to be properly grateful without making a speech. You take a step and a swallow lifts from a shadow and draws a quiet line in the air. It writes something you cannot pronounce and does not care that you cannot. It lands elsewhere with dignity. You admire its economy and allow yourself a small copy of it as you move on. A long facade with modest grandeur leads you by square windows into a more generous household. In the peristyle, columns hold up the night with the same tact with which they hold up roofs. A small fountain lives at the center, barely a finger of water. Potted laurel, keep, their private counsel. An open study shows scrolls arranged with a particularity that escapes fuss. A stylus lies across a wax tablet that has been smoothed clean. You are unreasonably pleased to see a surface promising the possibility of good sentences. You are old-fashioned that way. The room approves. A slave passes at the far end with a lamp carried expertly, wrist loose, flame steady, feet making a speech about service without turning it into a sermon. He does not look at you, not out of fear, but because another person's night belongs to them. He goes by and the house closes like water behind him. Step outside and the street gathers itself once more. The mountain is where it was, impressed with its own sense of proportion, and not wrong in that. The bay is a rumor of breath. A fig silhouette is a hand that knows its talents. You will not improve any of these with commentary. At this point in our long drift, a word to those listening from bed. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Do nothing else. Let the algorithm and the dark do the heavy lifting between them. The lamp's oil shows low but competent. You top it with a practiced motion acquired half an hour ago and already stored as memory. The wick takes the offer without bragging. You move on with the kind of confidence that belongs to people who know where they are even when they do not know where they are going. A final house for this part sets a table with tomorrow in mind. A bowl of grain, a folded cloth, a knife pointing inwards, 2 cups turned upside down, a sprig of something green because it pleases someone to see it. A simple piety lives here. Prepare now, rest now, live later without drama. You endorse the policy wholeheartedly. When you step back into the street, the night recognizes you once more and allocates you your square of space and your share of air. The stones receive your tread and return it unchanged. The city keeps your pace and never asks for a receipt. You go on, pleased with a place that has made a home for the ordinary and invites you to sit in it without ceremony. You turn towards the city's edge, where walls begin to speak to fields, and fields answer with that good-natured indifference plants cultivate so well. Here grapevines stride in rows, their posts black against a lighter sky. The earth between them has been tended with a care that manages to appear casual. A ditch sidles along the side of the path and keeps its water. The air smells of soil, correcting its own mistakes, and of leaves doing their silent mathematics. A villa rests a little way off, with the clean angles of a house that has counted its columns and found the number pleasing, not grandiose, merely deliberate. A gate, wooden, banded, wears iron studs with the resigned bravado of armor that knows it is really a door. You stand and take the outline of it into your eyes, noting where shadow has joined it to the ground. Things are more trustworthy when they own their attachments. You skirt the estate and keep to the small lane, where hedges remember to be friendly. A tiny shrine to the crossroads, spirits appears as though it had grown there. A penny of smoke still clings to its ceiling. Someone has left a fig, half eaten on the ledge, an offering from a believer who thinks the gods understand appetite. There is a certain theological honesty in that. Past a bend, a burial ground draws a quiet margin along the road. Tombs stand shoulder to shoulder, a grammar of stone set out in sentences of love, duty, and a modest hope. Names are cut into the fronts with a firmness that expects to be read. A carved wreath, a clasped hand, a little relief of a basket or a tool. Lives. Written down in the way stone understands writing. You read two names aloud in your head because it's good manners. The silence answers with its usual eloquence. Vines again, then a stretch of open ground where nothing presses. The night breathes more deeply here. A pebble turns under your sandals and decides it has found a better position. You grant the promotion and walk on. An owl, somewhere to your left, refrains from pretending to be a poet and simply says what the owls say when they mean that everything is as it should be. You return gradually towards the gate and feel the city resume around you like a cloak politely offered. The road takes on its familiar seams, a patch here, a repair there, the kind of competence that tells you the magistrates have their minds on the small things, which is where a city lives or dies. A shop of lamps keeps a faint after scent of oil. The shelves stand as ranks of shallow moons. A few wicks have been trimmed to pretty little tails, the way a conscientious person leaves their work, ready for someone else to succeed. A tally mark on a scrap of wood notes 6 delivered, 2 repaired, 1 to be collected. The handwriting has nothing to prove and manages to show everything. Near the forum once more, you come upon a book dealer's little room. Scrolls reside in pigeonholes like birds that have learned better manners. A waxed cord holds 1 bundle that will travel in the morning to a friend's friend in a nearby town. The label names an author you might count on for steady cents rather than fireworks. A good choice for breakfast reading. You resist the urge to pry. The night has lent you many keys, none of which ought to fit locks that are not yours. Circling back, you find a modest inn letting its quiet spill into the street. A servant nods at the doorway, half yawn, half salute. Inside, a man sleeps with his head on folded arms, utterly sure that the table will not take offense. The hearth keeps the faintest embers, more memory than flame. 2 traveling packs rest side by side under a bench like dogs that have recently agreed to a truce. You sit outside upon the bench that belongs to everyone and to no one. The square holds steady. At this pace, a whole hour can pass through you like water through clean wool. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. With that done, you allow the bench to tell you exactly how to sit, and for once you obey without second thoughts. When you rise, the night does not notice, which is how you know you are moving properly. You take the long side of the square and the short side of a lane. A distant voice reminds a mule to behave. The mule agrees in principle and delays in practice. Both parties will sleep well, because each understands the other's character. Domestic peace is made of such bargains. A final turn for this part brings you past a door where someone has painted a vase with a sprig of ivy. It looks like an idea that stopped just before perfection and became beautiful by accident. The painter should never be told. The charm depends on ignorance. You let the thought go the way one lets a respectful visitor out into the night, grateful, unannounced. The hour pulls gently towards that cool scene before dawn, although the east has not yet thought of being pale. You make a little circuit of streets that have decided to be private, and they permit you on the understanding that you will not turn that privilege into noise. A threshold shows the word salve in tiny tesseract at an angle that persuades you the craftsman laughed at least once while setting it. The letters keep their dignity despite the tilt. Next door, a doorway sports an iron ring shaped like a dolphin. Whoever chose it was both sentimental and right. We may have advanced in certain contrivances since then. We have not surpassed the good sense of a cheerful door handle. A baker's boy crosses with a basket under his arm. He walks in that precise way that calculates the exact amount of effort necessary and then does not steal from or add to it. Inside the basket, the first bread of the morning bumps slightly against the wicker and makes a sound so domestic that you are briefly in love with civilization again. He does not look at you. The bread requires looking at the ground. It gets it. A corner shop displays little glass bottles in its window, green, blue, dreamlike, each with a bubble that exists because nobody told it not to. The shapes are practical, and because of it, lovely. A row of unguents is marked with tidy text: rose, myrtle, violet, laurel. Someone in the morning will choose one according to temper and budget. The sea will smell, for an hour or so, like the difference between intention and vanity. One must not confuse them. Both are serviceable. You pause beside a wall where 3 hands have played with geometry and chalk. A triangle carries a boast. A square replies. A circle declares itself above such squabbles and does not enter the list. The handwritings differ by age and patience. None of the drawings are straight. All of the thoughts are. You like their company. Along a quiet side street, a small room reveals a loom. The warp is set. The weft waits in a shuttle, and the foot treadle has acquired that polish which only a few thousand good decisions can provide. A basket holds scraps that will become something or nothing, and nothing would be a fine outcome if comfort is achieved on the way. A thimble sits where a thumb will expect to find it. There are rooms that have the talent of teaching you efficiency without drawing a diagram. This is one. You step out and catch the sense of the town stretching under its blankets, a million domestic muscles adjusting without waking. The air wears the faintest metal suggestion from a smith who has been ambitious with dawn before and will be again. Farther off, the harbor remembers itself and tucks the memory in, because night deserves its continuity. It is tempting at this point to philosophize. The streets will forgive you, but only up to a point. Better to make a small remark and leave it there. A city that lets you go about at night while it rests is a civilized one. The proof is in every quiet doorway that has declined to bark at you. You pass a schoolroom window held open by a wedge. On the sill, a wax tablet bears a half-finished declension, and a teacher's hand has added a neat correction in the margin with a degree of generosity not always associated with grammar. The room smells of reed pens, dry dust, and the effort of children who are on visiting terms with attention. You respect them from a distance. They will not notice. They are busy earning their future kapitsti to be bored with grace. Ahead, the street inclines modestly and then thinks better of it. You follow. The mountain on your right has not moved and will not. Its shadow is the simple truth of geology written in a hand you cannot mistake. You are tempted to assign meanings to it. Resist. It is big because it is big. The night is soft because it is soft. The lamp is small because it is small. The piece is large because nobody has been foolish enough to reduce it. A dog lopes past, slow and convinced of its own unimpeachable errands. It takes no notice of you, and therefore pays you a compliment. You return it by not calling to it in a voice that would make you look needy. 2 adults in the prime of their manners. You pause again to breathe within the cool seam the hour has handed you. The air carries the softest hint of ash from a hearth cooled to intelligence. A curtain stirs as if reconsidering an opinion. A pair of sandals by a door offer their straps like loyal explanations. It would be dishonest to claim that you need anything more. You allow yourself one long look backward at the avenue of houses, the blank eyes of windows that nevertheless notice, the low walls that understand the difference between threshold and barrier, the street that has taken every step and returned each one better behaved. Then you turn, not reluctantly, and go on. The streets have learned your step, and you theirs. You take the quieter thread between 2 houses, where the space is just wide enough for a car to feel admired. The air sits lightly. The lamp gives you its small, serviceable moon and asks for very little in return. That seems fair. You pass an insula, a block of flats where several Vunleys nest on the same bones of brick and beam. A stair climbs the interior like a sensible snake. Wooden, plain, tested by feet. Someone has set a pot of herbs on the second landing. A child has tucked a seashell into the soil as a private miracle. On the next level, a clay bottle leans on its side. Cork out, shoulder dusty. The sort of negligence that means no harm and does none. You hear the smallest cough, then the soft settle of a mother's voice. The room tucks itself down again. Domestic noise at night is like a sheet shaken out and laid flat. You cross to a water seller's corner. Two amphora lean against the wall, necks touching as if conferring. The man himself is not present, but his measure sticks weight like modest magistrates. On the plaster above, a hand has written prices in a script that looks like it prefers numbers to poetry. It is a trustworthy hand. No one will get rich from this tally, unless you count sleep as coin, in which case he is a banker. Round the angle stands a little workshop for sandals. Leather straps hang from a beam like quiet pennants. Awls lie tip to tip. A lass sits like a wooden foot considering the world from a patient angle. The room smells of hide and oil, a fragrance older than ambition. The lamp picks a buckle out of the shadows and turns it into a small planet for as long as you look. Your own sandals, having been reminded of their ancestry, behave perfectly. A short walk puts you in sight of a way shrine painted with a snake twines about an altar. The creature's scales have been caught with a few strokes that know what they are doing. The eyes suggest a wisdom that refuses to be pompous. Someone has left a pinch of grain on the ledge. It is an offering of the sort that keeps both human and serpent manners in good order. You drift into a narrow court where laundry lines hold the night's mild draught as if it were a hush one could see. A tunic rocks once and then remembers it has agreed to be still. Pegs grip and do not argue. On the paving, a small, chalked game waits for morning feet. The chalk itself, faint powdery, holds on as best it can. There is a handsome honesty in materials that admit their limits. A little higher up the street, a door stands open to a room of jars. Oil, wine, pickles, patience. Everything is sealed, labeled, stacked in the plain style that comes of knowing you will have to find it again in the dark. A ledger lies upon a shelf with a stylus across it. The wax shows a list and its tally. Lines cut with a quiet authority. You barely glance and learn precisely what the room intends you to learn. That tomorrow will be ready because tonight behaves itself. Beyond, the slope levels and the rooftops begin. A staircase you have not earned invites you, and the city forgives your curiosity enough to let you climb. From there, the night opens like a book at a page you thought you had lost. The bay makes its patient scythe. The mountain keeps its dark shoulder. A faint line of lamps from another settlement floats like a necklace put aside. The breeze finds you without asking your name and adopts you for a time. Up here, the household noises meet the sky and forget to be particular. What remains is a general ease. It would be greedy to demand a better posture for the soul. You sit on the parapet and let your hands rest beside you, palms down, as if taking an oath to be calm. A cock in the distance utters a rehearsal crow and then thinks better of it. A jug knocks a gentle note against another jug below and claims it was nothing. Somewhere, a night walker coughs, realizes he has become the only event on the street, and courteously declines further fame. You descend slowly and give the steps more credit than you'd give your own ankles. A lamplighter passes with the slow importance of a man entrusted with civilization's strength. He checks a wick, smiles to himself at its obedience, lifts his pole, and goes on. He has the air of a gardener watering a very small, very compliant hedge. At the next bend, a midwife's door carries a charm made of red wool and a tiny bronze hand. The hand shows a gesture old enough to have forgotten why it works, which is the best age for magic. The inner room is dark, but the bench outside keeps a cushion with the dent of someone who sat and told kind stories. The dent remains because the cushion has principles. A barber shop presents a mirror to the street, which returns a version of you that has learned to go to bed on time. A comb lies on a cloth folded in a way that would please the Navy, if the Navy existed. A razor sleeps with its blade covered, the sign of a professional not keen on surprises. A little shelf hosts oil and vinegar bottles for the sort of hair that likes to be persuaded. Your own keeps its own counsel and is applauded for it. You stop at a threshold because the floor demands it, a mosaic of a vine with grapes fat enough to make poets. The tesserae rise in the smallest relief. Your sandal feels them and reports good news. Inside, a triclinium, low couches, clean, cool, waits for the next evening, which will arrive precisely when it should. No sooner, no later. The table is cleared, but a nutshell under one foot tells a harmless lie about perfection. Rooms without nutshells are for afterlife brochures. The lane narrows into a sensible corridor between walls that have nothing to confess. Overhead, a loft spreads its simple belly of timber. A cat walks it like a tightrope and affects not to notice your admiration. The cat is right not to try too hard. Confidence is quieter than advertisement. You come out at a little market square used by fewer people at night, and all of them excellent. Stalls are asleep, awnings are furled. The smell of fruit lingers like a marginal note. A single olive has rolled away and found a home by a pillar. It has nowhere pressing to be. This earns it your respect. When you turn to leave, you take one look back to see if you have missed anything. You have not, which is a relief because missing things is tiring. The street lies ahead with the same honesty it started with. You go on, with the light in your hand and the city in your pocket where a good city belongs. The night has thickened into its calm middle. You head towards a cluster of gardens where the ground remembers everything it has been told and improves upon the tale. Low walls edge the plots. Vines keep their agreements. Fig leaves practice being cool to the touch. The air tastes green, then mineral, then a patient sweetness like the idea of honey learning its craft. A gardener's hut keeps a spade upright as if it were at attention. A broken handle leans against the wall in quiet disgrace. No one has had the heart to throw it away. On a shelf lie seed packets in little cloth wraps, each tied like a parcel you would trust to travel alone. A jar holds a mess of string, because string multiplies when left unattended. The hut forgives it. Back in the lane, a dye works drifts a thin ghost of purple across the street. The sort of purple that knows it ought not to be wasteful. Thoughts stand it like halted conversations. A pair of wooden paddles lean together as if embarrassed. Purple has a reputation for grandeur. Tonight, it behaves with the humility of a stain that has been taught manners. A few doors down, a scribe keeps a hand steady by lamplight. He is copying a letter someone cannot write for himself and must therefore feel in his throat while another man gives it at bones. The scribe's reed pen whispers across the sheet. He pauses, touches the tip to a sponge, and resumes. His expression says that clarity is a kind of charity. He's right. Opposite, a maker of dice and counters has left small cubes on a tray. Some of them wear their pips with swagger. Others look like children waiting their turn to be counted. You pick one up between finger and thumb and put it back because you don't belong to this game. To return a die to its place without changing the throw is a kind of courtesy. You come upon a little library corner, a civic shelf, where a clerk locks the shutters with a soft clack. Inside, scrolls are ranged by subject. Poets who remembered to breathe, historians who kept lists tidy, men with theories useful at breakfast and dangerous at dinner. On the wall hangs a map that misrepresents the world with confidence. You love it for the courage. A map that doubts itself is only wallpaper. A side turning brings you to the amphitheater's quiet circumference. Stone grows a new character at night, cooler, more persuasive. The seats sweep around in their sober arc. The arena floor looks like a word that the mouth prepares but does not say. At the gate, a notice sets rules in a tone halfway between stern and clucking. The voice of the city has many registers. This is the one that manages crowds by reminding them they are people. Nearby, the training barracks sleep. A rack of wooden swords stands like a forest that has agreed not to travel. A helmet rests upon a peg with the gravitas of a small moon in harness. You stand a moment and let the absence of shouts assert itself. Courage has its place. So does silence. The night wins this round without boasting. On the outer ring, a vendor's counter holds remnants of the day. A vinegar bottle with a brave cork, a jar of olives that has remembered to be salty, a basket with 2 figs, and the promise of a third. The stall board keeps a knife line from cutting. It has practiced this kindness for years. If you look closely, you can see a tally of sales scratched where a thumb would rest, commerce written in shorthand upon wood, a diary kept by touch. You drift away along a service lane that most visitors ignore and people who live here love. Clay pipes carry a thin song underfoot. Drains do their work with the piety of structures that are seldom praised and always missed. You make a mental note to thank the next sensible ditch you meet. The note will not be delivered. The gratitude will still be true. A perfumer's house breathes cool sweetness through its shutters. Laurel and myrtle, a shrug of a rose, something resinous that sounds like later. On a windowsill, a little unguent pot has been washed and turned upside down to dry. A fly, having reached late to the party, takes no for an answer. It has enough flaws without adding obstinacy. A money changer's bench sits inside a grill. Scales hang with their pans touching like cousins at ease. A tray with coin marks holds hundreds of small rounds in absentia. The arrangement is neat, which means the owner could be messy if he wanted to, and chooses otherwise. Temperance is virtue's quieter twin. In a small courtyard, a grape press stands, wooden beam on its post, trough ready. You lay a hand upon the timber and feel yesterday delayed in it. Wine is a miracle that has stopped applying for that title. The beam keeps the manner of a god who learned to be patient. This part of the city keeps its own dogs. One lifts its head and decides you would make a poor burglar. Its yawn is a public service announcement about trust. You return the compliment by being honest with your feet. You end at a bench beside a painted wall where ivy and birds have learned to be still without stiffening. The bench tells your bones what they need to know. You obey because obedience to comfort is sensible. Your thoughts take the long view and come back improved. If wisdom had a shop, it would sell seats. You angle towards the harbor quarter again, where ropes speak to posts and boats dream of being hills. The air holds tar and salt, the tidy arithmetic of nets, and the contentment of timbers that have learned to flex without sulking. The keystones wear the polish of good use, like old men who dress neatly without fuss. A watchman sits with his back to a bollard, cloak round his knees, face at that angle which hears before it listens. He does not challenge you. You do not require challenging. He nods a single good night as if it were a coin you could spend twice. You put it away and it continues to exist, which is the pleasant thing about such currency. Two fishermen count quietly. They do not name fish. They confirm that numbers still behave themselves. One points with his chin at a patch of darker water as if recommending a poem. The other follows the line and nods, not because he agrees, but because the chin has earned the courtesy of being seen. A warehouse keeps the day in ordered stacks. Amphorae with dipped marks. Crates with lids tied. Reeds knotted into mats that pretend to be strong and are. A chalkboard records arrivals with a hand that never attended an art school and did not need one. You love the script for its rightness. The warehouse rests, having done its labor without sighing about it. Across from it, a rope maker's lane coils its goods along the wall like tame serpents. The fibers betray the sea, the fields, and the hands that brought them together. Rope is one of those inventions that ought to wear medals, and does not. It holds everything in place and asks no applause. You salute it with the rank appropriate to string. You turn inland where food sellers will begin before dawn. A cart waits with bowls nested like polite relatives. A pestle sleeps in a mortar with the intimacy of old friends. On the cart's side, someone has carved a small bird, and the bird has lost an eye to the chisel. It winks permanently. Art keeps its humor where it can. A bath's attendant sleeps across the street, keyring muffled in cloth. He goes through a door, checks something you cannot name, and reappears without comment. Order is kept not with speeches but with small, regular acts. He is fluent in them. A street of painters offers doorways with color lingering in their throats. Pots sit with lids firm. Brushes bristle in jars. A chalk line across a threshold makes its diagonal case and wins. On one wall, a fresh panel shows a garden where the sky is a fraction too blue. The painter has taken the liberty because blue is good for the heart and he knows his business. He will be forgiven because forgiveness and blue enjoy one another. You lean a shoulder against a column in a small portico and look down a perspective that makes sense of everything for just as long as you stand there. Straight lines promise honesty. The moon agrees to lend contrast. In the distance, a bell marks a change of the watch. Somewhere else, a woman turns over and does not wake. The bell and the woman do not know of one another and cooperate perfectly. A physician symbol, bronze, modest, hangs by a door. Inside, a shelf of jars holds words like honey, vinegar, mallow, poppy, arranged in an order that seems slightly superstitious and therefore dependable. A cup of bronze looks like something that has tasted too many remedies to believe in any one of them and remains honorably hopeful. The best sort of skeptic. At a corner, the coppersmith's yard contains shapes asleep. Bowls, basins, little gods of domestic labor. A sheet leans against a wall showing hammer marks like a map of considered decisions. An apprentice has left a pair of tongs open just enough for a spider to have an idea. The spider reconsiders and builds elsewhere. Prudence is the better part of architecture. You climb shallow steps to a loggia that frames the street, as if a painter had positioned you. The air is cool and just on the edge of thinking about becoming colder. Your lamp finds itself unnecessary for a minute and sulks gracefully. You let it. Even lamps prefer a little drama when they can afford it. From here, you spy a small courtyard where a family keeps pigeons. The birds tuck their heads into shoulders and ruffle once, then believe in sleep again. A grain dish sits under the eaves, a promise for the morning that the birds, being practical, will claim precisely and without gratitude. Grateful pigeons would worry you. You step down and follow a shadowed viaduct that mumbles water in a voice too low to suspect of boasting. It carries the city's quietest pride. A slackness of air says a garden gate stands a fraction open. Inside, a statue watches, with that Roman ability to be specific and general at once. You decline to invent its thoughts. It declines to invent yours. Friendship proceeds on fair terms. At length, you return to the more domestic streets, bringing the harbor's breath with you until the houses take it and make it home smell again. A puppy stirs under a bench, discovers it remains a puppy, and resumes being an argument for tenderness. You concede at once. One must be clever where cleverness belongs, and foolish where foolishness improves the world. You pause at a door lintel and note a small cluster of dried flowers tied with a strip of cloth. The color has nearly gone. The intention has not. Gesture is a currency that holds its value longer than dye. You stand a second to read what was meant, then spend it by moving on with better manners. The night has reached that curious hollow before the east lightens, a pocket of time so gentle it could be mistaken for absence. It isn't. It hums with held breath. You aim yourself along a street that knows bakers by name and officers by their boot scuffs. It greets both with equal accuracy and no drama. At the first bulgari, shutters lift, hinges murmuring their private vowels. Inside, the oven has been coaxed awake by hands that understand what wood likes to hear. The heat begins as a promise and becomes a fact, the way good plans do. A boy turns a quern with a patient circle, grain sighs, and thinks about being flour. The sound is a modest sermon on perseverance. You attend without taking notes. The baker scores fresh loaves with a swift cross. He does not look ceremonious. He looks like a man rescuing a day before it has had a chance to misbehave. A woman weighs nuts into a bowl with the accuracy of someone who has been short-weighted enough times to despise the practice. Their exchange is a choreography of glances and elbows. No words wasted, no kindness forgotten. This is what competence looks like when it has shed its medals. You step out, and the air flattens in that graceful way that means dawn is thinking of itself. A street sweeper pulls a small brush along a gutter and collects an anthology of the previous day. Straw, thread, a coin that failed to be lucky. He keeps the coin because it is his turn. He will wash his hands before breakfast because he is civilized. At a market corner, early sellers arrive with baskets. Figs sit like planets, briefly convinced by gravity. A girl stacks radishes so that they look stern and cannot help it. The stallboard makes a line of cups and a jar of salt appears, not because it was summoned by ritual, but because salt improves everything that deserves it. A dog makes a proposal to a sausage and is turned down. Its dignity holds. You take a lane you have not tried and find a house of painted fish. On the wall, a shoal moves in perpetual silence, each fish earnest about its direction. Inside, a cool room keeps jars set into a masonry counter, the same practical style as every clever kitchen in this town. A speck of scale has found the edge of a tile and gleams unreasonably like treasure. You leave it to its exaggerated self-esteem. Next door, a teacher unlocks a door and exhales the sigh peculiar to educators and blacksmiths. He sets a tablet out, checks chalk, and decides not to rearrange the bench yet, because he will rearrange it twice before 9. He has made peace with this. He is a philosopher of the particular. You run a palm along a wall that once bore a campaign poster, and now hosts a ghost of persuasion. Names linger. The paint a mere rumor. You imagine the voices that shouted themselves hoarse, and then went home to stew and bread, and the sense that the city might yet be improved by the simple tonic of tidy accounts. Hope is not naive. It is work. In a courtyard, a woman shakes a mat and creates a dawn for the dust. The dust is grateful in its fashion by going elsewhere. On a rope, a row of small tunics admits freely that a family has made itself. The admission is pleasant. She straightens one peg, and in that motion writes a sentence about care that would embarrass marble. You wander back to the forum where 2 statues oversee emptiness that is thinking about being company. The paving tells the soles of your sandals a history of carts, sandals, hooves, and the day the town decided to repair the middle and not the edges. The decision was odd. The result is excellent. Human beings draw straight lines through crooked reasons and call it policy. Sometimes it works. A seller of ink opens a shutter. The little vials wink. The lamp black settles. He checks a scale with the gravity of a priest and then biles at a memory so private it could be a sin. You do not pry. People are improved by their secrets. A cobbler yawns so extravagantly that his awls blush. He takes a heel in his hand, tilts it, and argues with it in a whisper. The heel offers counter-arguments in leather. Agreement is reached. The shoe will be ready by noon, and the person it belongs to will think fate has been merciful. In fact, it will have been leather, and a man who does not rush. You turn into a lane of ovens, where each doorframe remembers the smell of something sweet, even if nothing sweet is present. Memory improves the world with an unfair hand. You are willing to be cheated. A honey cake exists somewhere near. It has already been promised to someone and will not make a scandal of it. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. It is the sort of decision you can make while half asleep and still be applauded by your better self in the morning. You return to the street as if you had put a small coin on a saucer and meant it. A bench under a plane tree calls you again. You sit. The bark has flaked as bark does and lies at the roots like a casual gift. Two sparrows hold a debate of no consequence and win it. The first ash gray of east creeps into the dark and tidies it, the way a good servant straightens a room without insulting it. Lamps look less necessary. The moon becomes a rumor. You rise, because the city will soon collect itself. You take one last look at the mountain, which keeps its decent distance and its perfect shape. You feel briefly that you should learn its name for a second time, as if you hadn't known it all along. Then you let the thought go. The night has had enough of thinking. It prefers being. You move on with that obedient step you have learned from Pompeii. Quiet, regular, convinced that ordinary is a very fine thing to be. Dawn thinks about itself and then delays. Like a careful official with a pleasant habit of being late, the streets remain theirs, and you remain theirs with them. Your lamp has thinned, but does not complain. It keeps enough flame to persuade your shadow to behave. That is all anyone asks of a shadow at this hour. You steer towards a quarter where household gods seem especially well tended. Door niches hold fresh ash and tiny cups, the sort that take a single thumb's worth of wine and make a ceremony of it. Laurel sprigs have crisped at the tips and smell faintly of yesterday's hope. A lizard slips from a crack, does an excellent impression of a bracelet, and vanishes. You allow it the satisfaction of having fooled you. A portico opens on your left. Plain comes with the modesty of men who keep their hair short. Inside, a courtyard gathers a restrained geometry. Pebble path, square of earth, jar at each corner. A vine has been taught to travel in a good direction. It obeys because obedience is convenient and flattering. A seat under the eaves has the look of a promise kept. It will keep it again later without turning it into a performance. Back outside, the pavement changes its accent for a few yards. New stones, sober joints, a magistrate's budget well spent. Then the paving returns to its older diction and gets on with the business of being reliable. Your feet can hear these differences. They translate each dialect into comfort and report back that all is well. A practical embassy. A gate ahead has been painted a blue that refuses to be sensible. It is forgiven because the color is exactly right for joy. You pause long enough to learn it by heart, and then let it go before you become attached. Attachment has its place. Blue gates are not it. A woman steps out with a broom and persuades last night into a tidy morning. She moves leaves along the gutter as if she were reading them to sleep. A boy follows with a clay jar, looks up at the sky to test whether it is still there, and is reassured. He sets the jar down and does not drop it. This counts as success and will be remembered when he boasts later of larger victories. You pass a house whose threshold greets visitors with a small mosaic fish. The fish swims eternally towards the street, which is either optimism or poor navigation. It has chosen its vocation and keeps to it. Inside, a wall painting shows a bowl of fruit, so attentive to its own ripeness that you would be a fool to refuse it, even in paint. You decline out of politeness to the householder's breakfast. The city sharpens its smell by a degree. Bread, clean water, a first suggestion of charcoal. A stonecutter's yard puts up its shutters and stretches its joints in the person of an old man with a back that has learned the alphabet of weight. He touches a slab with affectionate contempt. The slab remains itself and takes no offense. A chisel lies beside a mallet. Both pretend to be asleep and fail. Tools make poor actors. It is part of their charm. You angle down a narrow run where walls lean close enough to carry a conversation without raising their voices. A small bronze bell hangs on a string outside a door. It swings once for the pleasure of the idea and is content. The wood of the door shows a handprint near the latch, darker where hundreds of palms have remembered their business. Doors keep biographies without gossip. Half a dozen steps further, a room shows a loom and the kind of order that has no need of piety. The warp runs taut. The weft waits with mild patience. A basket of shorn ends sits like well-behaved storms. A stool has acquired polish at the edges and still thinks little of it. When a life goes well, it looks like this from the outside. Nothing to photograph, everything to be grateful for. The air cools slightly. A lane draws breeze from nowhere in particular because it has learned how. A curtain lifts in a soft phrase and drops again. Somewhere near, a jar lid clinks. Somewhere far, a cock reconsiders its autobiography and edits out the noisy chapters. The night holds its shape as if reluctant to sign off. Sensible night. You take a short climb to a terrace that gives you a borrowed piece of sky. From here, rooftops assemble into a quiet parliament. Tiles consider dew, chimneys consider smoke. The bay thinks of silver and decides against it for now. The mountain's outline is the same sermon in the same tone. Consistency has no better advertisement. Below, a pair of slaves carry a litter without a passenger, practicing the exact motion that turns lift into float. They move like a single animal learning a simple trick. One coughs, the other adjusts pace until the cough is finished. Nobody congratulates anybody. The trick is to make good work look boring. They are brilliant at it. You descend and walk past a wine shop with a half door open, and for a line up inside with the air of soldiers saved from marching. A board bears a chalk list of yesterday's pour and a cautious suggestion for today. Wine is a citizen of many temperaments. The chalk knows this and writes in a forgiving hand. A fly attempts a career as a critic and is ignored. A man at a corner table eats olives with a concentration that recommends him to a promotion he will never accept. He removes each stone as if he were rescuing a city from siege. Perhaps he is. Food gives people ideas beyond its station. This is why we love it. You pass a wall where someone has scratched 3 lines. I promised the moon a coin. It lent me light anyway. I owe it twice now. The handwriting is not neat. The dead is. You nod to the debtor in absentia and hope he keeps up his payments in small, regular installments of decent behavior. Another courtyard. Another pool of water. Another square of sky. You could do this for years and never grow tired. A willow has been coaxed to thrive in a pot larger than its ambition. It tries to weep and fails cheerfully. A terracotta dog by the steps shows a nose rubbed bright by children's fingers. Piety comes in many shapes. This one wags when no one looks. As you leave, a gatekeeper shifts on his stool and performs the brief opera of deciding whether to scratch his ear. He chooses elegance and does, discreetly. Great decisions are cousins to small ones. Both benefit from style. You return to the street, attentive to the small senses of sound. Broom on stone, handle on latch, foot on stair, water into bowl. When a city wakes well, it does so not with trumpets, but with sentences that have learned brevity. Pompeii is literate in this regard. The eastern edge of the sky has bleached by a finger's width. The lamps look as though they might apply for retirement. They will be refused, and rightly. There is a little night left to supervise. You carry yours as if it were an old friend who tells the same story again and makes it better the second time. You listen because you are kind and because the story improves you, which is the secret you'd rather not share. You take one more lane as a gift to yourself. It returns the gift wrapped in mourning, which is exactly your size. You put it on without fuss. A cooler seam runs through the streets, the sort that makes skin grateful and minds even-tempered. You follow it until it gathers into a small square that has never pretended to be important. Shops present their polite faces. Thresholds keep themselves clean. A bench waits with the optimism of furniture that believes in bottoms. A potter's room opens to the square. Inside, a wheel stands ready. Clay sits under a cloth like a morning person under a blanket, waiting for usefulness. Shelves host bowls that have not yet learned color, their shapes tidy, like ideas preparing to become opinions. A child's thumbprint dimples one rim. Accident or authorship, equally good. The potter himself appears, studies the thumbprint, and fails to be cross. Wisdom often looks like laziness to people in a hurry. Next door, a goldsmith's counter sleeps behind a grill. A tray holds tools precise enough to be vain and not ashamed of it. Pliers, tiny saw, files that speak in a whisper. On a cloth rest 2 rings, one complete, one in the act of becoming. The incomplete one reveals a seam that looks like a wound it will soon forget. Metals have memories, and then they have manners. The second is nicer. A seller of garlands lifts her shutters. Threaded flowers dangle on sticks like little processions pause for breath. The day will carry them through weddings, altars, a child's name day, a lover's apology, whatever requires prettiness with intention. She tastes a leaf to judge its stubbornness and looks pleased. Plants bribe us into civilization with color and scent. We bribe them back with water and poetry. The exchange rate favors everyone. You step into a street where the smell of olive oil is frank and companionable. A press is housed behind a timber frame. The beam rests now, but the stone screw carries yesterday's effort in its threads. Baskets of pulp sit in a stack so authoritative, you'd appoint them to office. A boy picks a stray pip from the floor and pockets it with the grave air of a treasurer. It will become a missile by noon and a lesson by sunset. Opposite, a teacher of rhetoric arranges stools with theatrical restraint. His room holds a dignity larger than its rent. On the wall, a tablet bears a maxim in a well-shaped hand. Speak plainly and be thought wise. Speak kindly and be thought good. Do both and be employed. One suspects he has distilled a career into 3 lines and hopes to charge interest. You cross towards the quieter garden houses where walls have learned to provide shade before anyone asks. In one, the peristyle is a diagram of patience. A central fountain thickens the air with courtesy. Along the colonnade, small statues keep attitudes that manage to be graceful without becoming silly. A dog prints its paws in the dust and considers whether to apologize. He does not, and is right. In a side room, a music stand holds a roll of notes set down by a hand that prefers order. On the table beside it, a small double pipe rests, reed bound with thread. The player will bring breath to it after breakfast and remind the neighbors of divisions they had not known they wanted. For now, the score remains dignified and quiet, like law before it reaches the courts. At the far end, a kitchen lays out its small strength. A mortar carries the perfume of garlic and herbs. An honest declaration of character. A knife has been set down with its edge turned towards the wall, a habit from households where caution has been learnt once and remembered always. A corner shelf keeps a pot of honey as if it were a civic virtue. It is. You lean on a pillar for a heartbeat and watch a swallow write loops under the eaves. It scribbles like a genius pretending not to be one. The bird decides when to stop and no one disputes it. Authority done properly is not loud. Back in the street, the launderer opens his place with a tilt of the head and a noise in the throat that translates as you were. Jars stand in their appointed ranks. The little trough thinks about work and chooses to be noble again. The smell is a philosophy treated with due suspicion and grudging respect. Cities are built on trades that make poets wince and households run. Both are right. You pass a mender of nets who has started early. He sits with a line across his knee and a needle between finger and thumb. His thread knows more about the sea than writers generally do. Knot by knot, he convinces absence to behave like presence. When he finishes, fish will fail to understand why a hole is not a hole. This is honorable fraud. A scribe for hire has set up a table in the shade. He carries ink, patience, and a face that persuades secrets to settle in the right order. A woman dictates a letter with care and stops to consider a word. He offers the gentle one rather than the showy one. She accepts and tells him the name to write. The name looks pleased immediately, which is what names do when given a decent sentence to live in. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. It is a promise that requires nothing of your hands and very little of your mind. Good promises ought to be like that at dawn. You move on through a small arch into a lane where walls are painted with scenes of gardens that improve upon the possible. Birds pose with a conviction that would earn them fees in grander cities. Grapes hang in perfection, unbothered by gravity. A fountain plays forever without learning boredom. The painter was a better theologian than he knew. A shop ahead sells inkwells and tablets. On a shelf sits a little bottle of gloss black worth more than it looks. On another, a tray of wax with the neatest surfaces you have seen today. The owner flirts with the notion of rearranging everything and then wisely does nothing. Sometimes improvement is disguise for restlessness. The shop, as it stands, is sufficient. A barber opposite strops a razor and whistles 3 notes of a tune that does not require more. He surveys a chair as if it were a throne kept for ordinary citizens. He will hear confessions today that priests never get, and he will keep them because barbers know the cost of words. He nods to you with the professional warmth of a man who could make you look sharper, and chooses not to take offense when you continue as you are. At the corner, a threshold mosaic shows a theater mask smiling with good teeth at the seriousness of life. It makes a sturdy point. You step over it and take the point along, not as an argument but as a companion. The light in the east is softer now, turning the tops of walls into mild banners. The mountains line is a rule drawn by someone with a steady hand. The bay rehearses silver again, and this time allows a little of it. You slow without deciding to, the way a person does in a museum when the room suddenly contains their favorite painting. The street is your favorite painting. It will be again tomorrow and the day after, because it is so competent at being itself. You look back once, not to check, but to admire the fact that nothing requires checking. Then you go on, with the steady, ordinary pleasure that is the best thing night can give to morning. The lane leads you into a quarter where sleep hangs longer on the eaves, and the houses keep their counsel with a practiced grace. You carry the lamp low and let the stone do its steady arithmetic beneath your sandals. A painted vine runs along a wall, leaves picked out by a hand that knew how green behaves in moonlight, and you catch yourself moving slower to match its patience. The breeze comes thin from the bay and folds itself neatly into the corners. Even the shutters appear to breathe, draw in, let go, behave. If civilization had a bedtime routine, this would be it. A modest doorway opens to an atrium where the improvium holds a disc of sky the color of pewter. The pool is edged with a narrow lip of marble, worn by elbows and the sort of conversation that does not mind drifting. The household gods stand in their niche with wreaths that have gone dry at the tips. The smell is of ash, bay, and something faintly sweet from yesterday's wine. On a stool rests a child's toy cart, axle mended, wheels proud of themselves. You admire it with a seriousness the cart deserves. Toys are the rehearsal rooms of a city. Back outside, the pavement shows an honest patch where a magistrate spent just enough coin to be remembered kindly. Your foot feels the change in a language older than speech and reports satisfaction. A scribble on the plaster nearby advertises figs at a price that would pass for generosity if you did not know how markets gossip. The hand is bold, the figures fair. Trust here is a custom more than a rule. The rules come later with chalk and scales and a shrug that makes everything lawful. A bend brings you to the edge of a little compound where a mule stands with the resignation of saints. Its rope traces a quiet curve to a ring. Its ears annotate the night with small corrections. A man sits on a low stool and cleans a harness strap with oil and rag, the motions tidy and uncomplaining. He sets the buckle to rights, tests the hole, nods. The job is older than cleverness and better for it. The mule consulted withholds comment. On the whole, it approves of jobs that do not require speeches. The alley narrows and invites you to place your palm upon the cool of the wall as you pass. Brick and lime exchange their stored weather into your skin. The pulse that answers is not in a hurry to prove anything. At a corner, two jars lean shoulder to shoulder, necks touching like a private treaty. Above them, a crack in the plaster has been bridged with a neat butterfly of bronze. No fuss, no lamentation. A city's self-respect, hammered flat, pinned down, and quietly future-proofed. A short court opens, and a bench obliges your bones with the competence of furniture that keeps its promises. You sit and watch an insect write a small sentence across the lamplight and then rub it out. The house opposite wears a fresh coat of ochre that lifts the dark without boasting. A curtain breathes once. Somewhere, water climbs a well rope and thinks better of it. You register the catalog of small decencies and feel yourself drawn into their calm arithmetic. You rise, because benches are most honest when not abused, and you drift towards a tiny shrine at a junction. Two painted snakes, a dish for grain, a sublime ceiling, a history of household vows thick as plaster. Someone has left a fig leaf, green yet, with a brown thumbprint at the stem. The gods of crossings have low standards on purpose. They bless intention and tidy habits. The miracles can wait for mornings with more theater. You follow the line of stepping stones that walk the gutter like polite turtles, and come out beside a wall where a single window stands open to the night. Inside, a woman's voice counts in a whisper as she plaids her daughter's hair for morning. 4, 5, 6. The numbers are little pegs on a clothesline of tenderness. When she is done, she kisses the crown of the head, as mothers do when no one is watching. The kiss makes a sound you could spend all year listening to, and not grow greedy. You go on, content with the ordinary as the city intends. The lamp's pool nods along at your ankle like a small obedient dog, and the night keeps its end of the bargain. It does not startle. It does not scold. It does not waste your time with dramas that have not earned their keep. If peace had a face, it would be this street after midnight. Clean, experienced, and unconcerned with your opinions. A broad wood when receives you with the self-possession of stone that has learned to carry carts without sulking. Wheel ruts run like old lines of verse. Your step fits the meter and improves its mood. A painted notice on a pillar sings the virtues of a candidate who promises drains and decent scales. The paint has faded into honesty. Across the way, a grocer's shutters hold the last trace of olives and fennel, a perfume that could pass for thrift if bottled. If markets are the city's tongue, dawn is when it remembers its manners. You pause before a door whose threshold declares have in neat tesserae, a greeting with the modest swagger of Latin that intends to be friendly without clapping you on the back. Inside, the atrium squares itself around a pool, sky balanced upon water, columns holding up the sensible part of the night. A shelf near the lararium keeps tiny clay dogs and a smear of cinnamon. The offering smells like someone made a pudding and remembered the gods. The lamp on the sill is a normal thing done properly, which passes for reverence in a busy town. Along the peristyle, a small room opens. Loom, basket of flax, a stool with 3 legs, and enough experience to manage. The warp is strung. The shuttle roll rests. A thread trails like a patient intention. On the opposite wall, a painting pretends to be a garden and gets halfway there by understanding shadow. A bird balances on a painted twig with the confidence of a liar who tells the truth well enough to be forgiven. You admire the deceit and the gardener who doesn't mind being improved. Back in the street, you find a barber's doorway, mirror angled to catch incoming faces. A towel hangs from a peg, its edge square, its patience long. In the glass, you see yourself wear the night like someone else's fine cloak, too big in the shoulders and perfect in the drape. The bench outside bears the polished dip where confidences go to be tidied into sentences and then forgotten by agreement. Barbers know more histories than historians and publish less. Further on, a baker rolls a car to his door and sets his paddles to lean like quiet oars. The oven's mouth reddens in a blush that means good bread is plausible. A boy flour dusts the peel as if convincing a reluctant god to be generous. The god, being pragmatic, approves. The baker scores the first round with a cross learned from necessity, not piety, and sets it in with a flick that would win applause if anyone were awake to behave badly. He prefers the hour as it is, private, efficient, civilized. A reset of cool air runs like a narrow river down the lane, and you step into it as into a kindness. The lamps along this stretch have begun to look like elders at a feast, pleased to be present, happy to yield the serious work to younger hands when invited. A dog at a doorway lifts its head, assesses your worth, and decides you are the sort of person who will not interrupt dreams. This is the most flattering verdict on that offer at this hour. A small arch marks a change of neighborhood. Beyond it, the walls wear more paint and less patience. A quarter fond of its own noise, now on best behavior. The thermopolia sleep with their ladles neat. A gaming board scratched into a sill keeps yesterday's argument in escrow. The wine shop imagines a joke for later and grins on the inside. The street, for once, agrees to keep secrets until breakfast. You stop where a pigeon has chosen to be foolish on a cornice. It bobs, surveys, and chooses to remain a pigeon. A child somewhere laughs in sleep at an unrelated matter. The laugh bounces off stone with the gentle elasticity of hope. You take the hint and go on without hurrying. If fortune likes a posture, it is this one. Upright, unhurried, willing to be content with enough. A side lane folds you into a pocket of craft. Leather, bronze, thread, arranged without the vanity of a market. A sandal maker has left his awls nose to nose, and a last poised mid-thought. The leather shaped to a foot that trusts cobblers over gods. On a shelf, a pair of buckles lie like tame moons. Your lamp fetches eyes shine out of them and returns it politely. Across the lane, a bronze smith keeps a tidy graveyard of offcuts, each ready to be resurrected as something usefully domestic. In Pompeii, leftovers fear obscurity less than they fear disorder. You stop at a narrow doorway where a painted Mercury tips his hat with that brisk insolence that makes shopkeepers adore him. Beneath a slate lists accounts in chalk. Jars out, jars back, a note that Gaius owes to written with the resigned humor of men who learned fractions before they learned lies. The numbers keep their equanimity. The hand that wrote them asks nothing but an honest Friday. It is Tuesday, but hope keeps the calendar supple. The lane kinks and opens upon a tiny court where a fig tree wraps the air in a soft green grammar. At the far wall, a laundry line has earned its night off. Pegs rest like sensible teeth. A folded cloak sits upon a chair and gives a good impression of a sleeping citizen. A small cat is curled upon the step in a shape that refutes geometry and convinces wisdom. You consider trying the posture and decide Civilization needs you standing for another hour. Beyond, a baker's second oven shows its red mouth, and a boy sweeps flour into tidy galaxies on the stone. He is learning orbit, not hygiene, but tomorrow's bread will be better for the lesson. The mill hums in a slow pulse that translates to worth it. A woman balances a tray on her hip with that secular sanctity bread bestows. She looks like a minor goddess hired by a practical temple. The temple, to its credit, pays in loaves. A short calm gathers at the corner of two streets where the wind intersects. You lean your shoulder to the wall and let the air prove itself. Across from you, an old man tidies a row of jars by tapping each one so it remembers its rank. This is the sort of bureaucracy that improves the world. Jars, ranks, tap, done. A child appears, stares with reverence at the ritual, and will repeat it later to make sense of things the gods have not yet explained. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. The only requirement is to remain exactly where you are. Geography loves a lazy pilgrim. You take the longer curve towards a house whose threshold shows a black dog that's been guarding the door since fresco was wet. The teeth are very white. The chain is very theoretical. Inside, a bench keeps the imprint of a conversation and refuses to gossip. The ice cream's pool mirrors a star trembling on the surface, then deciding to be still. If philosophy had a practical application, it would look like this. Water, star, breath, enough. The road slants towards a stretch where gardens lean their green shoulders over low walls. Vines hold their trellises with a craftsman's touch. Rosemary edges remember 1,000 elbows and forgive them all. The earth speaks the quiet dialect of dew. Crickets do their patient arithmetic and refuse applause. You walk as if you belonged, which is the secret contract of the knight and guest. A villa shows its outer face, clean, deliberate, the architecture of a household that has learnt when to be generous and when to be exact. The gate is banded in iron and has nothing to prove. The hinge knows its hinge work and performs it without theater. Inside the fence, a path runs white and sensible towards a peristyle you choose not to invade. You stand instead with the decency of a neighbor, admiring from the correct distance. Laurel in tubs, a fountain the size of a good argument, a lamp at the far arch fattening the dark with gold. A smaller house nearby has put out its jars to ask the night for coolness. Clay listens, cools, and returns the favor at breakfast. On the sill, a dish of olives waits sotto voce. A sprig of thyme rests across it like a signature. From within comes the rhythm of someone grinding with a pestle, slow, certain, a supper repaid to the morning in advance. Households that pay their debts in mortar and pestle find the gods far more reasonable. Farther along, a gatekeeper's stool sits empty and honest. The stool knows as much about the night as most poets and makes fewer claims. A broom leans at the threshold, bristles splayed to the degree that signals competence without cruelty. Somewhere, a sleepy hen considers the merits of a fourth roost and declines the adventure. This is how empires avoid scandals. Hence, with good judgment, the lane loosens into an edge road where the city and the country sign their compact one more time. Tombs keep their stone biographies to your left. Names cut with care, baskets carved for bakers, ships for shippers, clasped hands for those who chose to be remembered, together. Each inscription has a voice. All of them avoid shouting. You read one with your lips and one with your eyes, and give both the favor of being believed. Faithfulness looks like chiseled letters weathering well. A gentler breeze runs from the fields, and with it the odor of earth that has argued with dew and won politely. A farmer's cart waits with its shafts up, resigned and dignified, like a well-bred dog at a door. Somewhere a tether creaks. Somewhere an unseen ox shifts a single thoughtful hoof. If patience had a music, it would use these instruments and no others. You turn back, letting the walls draw nearer and the streets settle into their modest scales. A woman at a window lowers a small basket by cord and raises it again with a loaf inside. Commerce by whisper, payment by trust. She disappears after a soft thank you. The stone carries perfectly. Stone remembers favors longer than people and complains less. At your next corner, a painted advertisement for games pretends to be earnest and is, secretly, delighted with its own red. The letters strut in the lamplight, but the date below them is already past. To its credit, the poster takes irrelevance with good grace. You nod to it, as one nods to a retired actor. Bravura intact, schedule kinder. You finish this stretch beneath a plane tree that loosens flakes of bark, like the world shedding hurried opinions. The bench beneath it has adopted the shape of citizens and offers it to you without prejudice. You sit, as though you were the reason benches were invented, and find that for this minute, you are. The night keeps your place while you breathe. That is all you have asked of it, and it has granted more. The watchman's quarters sits modestly behind a strip of shops, a low doorway marked not by grandeur, but by buckets, hooks, and a ladder grown shiny with use. Inside, 2 vigils finish a quiet round of equipment. Leather buckets stacked, a siphon checked, a coil of hose nudged into better temper. They move with the practiced thrift of men who save their urgency for the hour that deserves it. One warms his hands on a brazier. The other chalks a list upon a board whose surface remembers more nights than most citizens. They talk about nothing. A cracked tile, a lazy mule, a niece who writes neatly. Such talk oils the city. You walk with them as far as the corner, then drift on, letting their lantern fade into the good dark. A lane here bows to a tiny shrine where 2 painted snakes face one another, tongues fine as threads. Grain lies on the ledge like a small treaty. Opposite, a wall records the gossip of the days, a boast recut 3 times, a heart, a joke that has outlived its punchline and acquired dignity. Your lamp draws the letters into a brief audience and then allows them their privacy. Words sleep better than people. A joiner's workshop keeps its peace with the decent smell of shavings and resin. Planes rest on their sides like dogs told to stay. Saws hang teeth down, contrite and eager. A frame with pegs waits for its dowels, and a stool intends to become a chair as soon as someone grants it legs. Timber offcuts stack in a corner with the quiet pride of things that will be useful later. A wooden mallet shows a polished crown where it has knocked sense into joints for years. It has arguments it would win in any court. Beyond, a courtyard offers the city a square breadth. Pool, 4 bright stars, the pale wash of a wall. A jar stands in the shadow of a column, damp halo cooling to logic. On a shelf, a pair of sandals share a strap mended deftly. The knot sits like a small, competent smile. From a back room hums the slow rhythm of a loom. You cannot see the weaver, only the sleeve and wrist as the shuttle passes and returns. Cloth is patience written in thread, and the room has learned the script by heart. The street turns and steadies itself towards a minor temple, the facade plain, the columns honest, the steps clean from yesterday's sweep. A door to the side stands open on a storeroom, lamps in their trays, oil in stoppered jars. Brooms stood as a choir of bristles. A boy asleep upon a folded cloak wakes, sees you, and decides the gods have not sent you. He smiles, turns his pillow to the cool side, and is gone again. Theology works best when it keeps children asleep. A breeze lifts the edge of your tunic. The air carries a rumor of the mountain as a line more than a fact. The stone beneath your feet holds an old tremor quietly, the way bones remember a fall and go on serving. Pompeii wears such memories in the way good houses wear repairs. No drama, no denial, no need for boast or prophecy. The city's pact with the earth is practical. You keep me up, I keep you useful. A single sentence of laughter escapes a shutter and runs along the wall like a cat. It is caught by the corner, patted once by a fig branch, and let go. You follow it to the end of the lane and find only an honest darkness doing its work. The night grows neither more solemn nor more silly for your attention. It accepts you as it finds you, which is a remarkably civil habit. You rest your palm upon the cool gate of a garden and count to 12, because counting is the alphabet of calm. Then you go on, satisfied with the arithmetic and the hour. A district of little courtyards leads you on, each with its private geometry. A square of ground, a square of water, a vine taught to copy the border. In one, a terracotta mask watches with comic gravity. In another, a laurel in a pot thinks of triumphs and is content to be shade. A family shrine holds ash and rosemary, the wreath crisping just at the edges. The room behind it smells of linen aired before dawn, that mild, high note of clean that makes even cynics gentler. You pass with the agreeable sensation of using doorways you have not earned. At a corner, a seller of lamp oil arranges his amphora in a row that will persuade even the indecisive. He lifts each by the neck as if greeting an old friend, checks a plug, wipes a lip, nods. A trader from out of town dozes on a bench with his mouth open, dreaming of roads that are shorter and hills that argue less. His mule stands with the stoicism of saints, and to be fair, saints could learn a good deal from mules. The harness gleams with yesterday's cloth. The brass answers your lamp with one steady blink. You come upon a small schoolroom not yet populated by its loyalties. Benches wait. A cracked tablet bears a verb rolled out like pastry, thin at the edges, generous in the middle. On the wall, a drawing of a ship sails forever towards a corner. Its rigging is part mathematics, part prayer. The master stool keeps a cushion that has learned to be patient with opinions. A rod rests upon 2 pegs in the manner of a roomer. The room prefers sentences to remedies. Round the bend, a woman lifts a pot from a low fire and lays a cloth over its mouth. Steam opens, considers, and decides to be polite. She sets a loaf on a board and scratches a blessing with a knife point. Not pious so much as practical. Blessings keep the hand steady. A child appears with a cup, shuffles, and offers the watery wine of morning with the seriousness of an ambassador. The treaty is ratified in 3 sips and a smile. A lull drifts through the alley. No current, no contrary. Merely the even seam between intentions. It is the sort of pause that improves decision-making by postponing it. The sky to the east has not yet made any promises, which is the best posture for truth. You stand still until you can hear your breathing stop trying to be interesting. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. If you have already, let that small decision keep working while you do not. You catch the forum's edge again, where statues keep their profiles like calm most arguments. A sweep of paving holds a new repair that glows faintly smoother than the old. It will learn the scratches of carts soon enough and be happier for it. A man with a broom draws a soft line of dust towards the gutter and, meeting a leaf too handsome to be hurried, shifts around it. Diplomacy is mostly a matter of noticing leaves. A lane of workshops declares its trades without boasting. A perfumer's shelf shows bottles the color of tide pools. A turner's lathe carries the ring of yesterday. A weaver's doorway holds one thread across the throat, a tiny, shining tripwire against hurry. A money changer unlatches a grill and balances a scale with the intimate shrug of a friend settling your cloak on your shoulders. He looks at the pans until they agree. They usually do when watched kindly. Farther along, the amphitheater's great oval rests like a sleeping ear. You stand at the outer wall and listen to the late hush folded carefully inside it. Beyond, a training yard leaves wooden swords stacked as though trees had learned manners. The silence here has a steadier grain than elsewhere. It is not the absence of noise, but the presence of agreement. You nod to it as one nods to a craftsman who measures twice and cuts once. You turn homewards to nowhere in particular. The mountain keeps its dark shoulder with the good grace of something that knows its size. The bay thinks again about silver and, out of charity, changes its mind. Doors blink into opening. Windows test their hinges. A cock proves he is alive and is forgiven. You lower your lamp and let the morning gain on you at the decent pace of a trustworthy companion. The streets turn their pockets out and offer you the last coins of night. You take them one by one. A latch settling, a dove's soft throat, a broom deciding which way the dust ought to travel. A stallboard leans against its door and pretends it has never fallen in its life. Your lamp thins, but the wrist knows how to keep flame honest. The wick listens and behaves. The mountain's shoulder sits where the sky keeps it. Patient as grammar, you accept the lesson without turning it into philosophy. Some knowledge prefers practical shoes. A baker's courtyard receives a delivery with the manners of early trade. A nod for a price, a thumb on the scale, a coin that rings properly when it lands in a palm. A boy runs a hand through flour and leaves a pale streak across his forehead like a soldier painted for war against sleep. The millstone turns with a sound that has learned to be reassuring. You watch 2 loaves cool and almost applaud, the way one applauds a good landing. Bread does not bow. It is above that sort of theater. Down a lane, a lamp maker arranges clay shells that will graduate into light. He checks each spout, each belly, each loop for suspending, the way a captain might check his fleet. A tray of trimmed wicks lies like small, obedient eels. He hums, and the clay hums with him in silence. The room smells of kiln and oil and the uncomplaining ambition of objects that want to be useful. You feel a mild pang of envy and file it under harmless. A modest house sits with its shutters half blinked. On the sill, a little row of cups stands upside down, like citizens who have turned in early. In the atrium, the pool reflects a single stubborn star. A curtain takes the shallow breath of the breeze and gives it back tidier. The lararium keeps a sprig of something green. The green keeps its appointment with night. A bed shows the print of a body. A cushion remembers a head. The room forgives both. Forgiveness is a skill few rooms master. This one manages. You pass a small smithy where last night's heat remains in the stones like a rumor. A water tub holds a skin of cool. that renegotiates with steam when a stray ember forgets itself. Hammers lie with their faces turned away, as if ashamed of their daytime noise. A pair of tongs rests open, learned hands discussing an argument they will resume later. Tools carry better tempers than people, and when they lose them, recover faster. The streets nod in agreement. A fountain corner talks in its even voice. Two women meet there with the sober cheer of those who have known short mornings and long afternoons. They exchange news in units measured by household respectability. Whose bread rose, whose child slept, whose husband has discovered the value of silence. One laughs under her breath, the other looks scandalized and is not. The lion's stone mouth pours domestic arbitration. Nobody objects. A painted Mercury presides above a shop door, ankles winged and expression unrepentant. Beneath, a slate counts jars returned and jars promised with the blunt courtesy of numbers. Gaius still owes 2. The gods, who can count without chalk, will overlook it today. You admire the restraint of heavens that know when to be merciful about storage. A corner cools into a pocket of shade left behind by a wall that knows how to manage summer. You step into it and feel the skin approve. On a bench, a folded cloak keeps last night's warmth like a small, square hearth. A cat tries to pretend it is not using the cloak. The cloak pretends it does not mind. Domestic politics at its best. You come to a narrow stair that climbs to a modest roof. Up there, the town rebegins itself in outlines. Parapet, tile, chimney pot, and the bay thinking itself into silver. A blush of east suggests the day will remember to be kind. A cock crows once and immediately regrets the drama. You forgive him in the spirit of public harmony. You sit and let the light discover you slowly, which is the only polite way to be found. You descend with a gratitude that has the sense to keep quiet. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Then forget the idea and let your feet finish the lesson they have started. Where the city narrows towards the amphitheater, the stones have learned to manage crowds and therefore carry one walker with grace. A vendor's counter waits with its jars washed and turned, the smell of vinegar faint as a memory. A chalk tally hangs on a nail, figs, olives, 2 handfuls of almonds that provoked more conversation than they deserved. The chalk has not lied, it has only been enthusiastic. You smile at its ethics and move on. A training yard keeps wooden swords arranged like a polite grove. Sand lies combed in long patient strokes as if someone had decided that even the ground should breathe evenly. A helmet rests upon a post with the gravity of a minor planet, dent shining where it learned a hard fact and kept the lesson. Courage will clock in later, take a modest wage and go home without speeches. The night signs its overtime sheet and knocks off. A side gate gives onto a street where a laundry hangs its last business on the air. Tunics rock once and agree to be still. A single scrap, forgotten, makes a bid for freedom and is caught by a peg that believes in civilization. You admire the peg. It lacks imagination and thereby saves the neighborhood from scandal. Beyond, a dyer's workshop keeps its vats and paddles as if they were choristers. The lids sit with a certain piety. Cloth bleeds color into the dark like a good rumor. Purple behaves itself for once, remembering that splendor at dawn is vulgar. The apprentices will swagger later. For now, the vats practice humility and do it convincingly. You fall in behind a pair of carters steering a cart with 2 shallow ruts for reins. They discuss prices and potholes with a tone that suggests the gods ought to listen more closely to roads. A mule flicks an ear, considers the argument, and sides with the potholes. The carters notice and take the hint. Theology that ignores mules tends to go wrong. A small schoolroom disgorges a sigh of chalk. Benches wait to be rearranged. A tablet bears yesterday's lines scraped flat with a gesture that forgives without forgetting. The teacher will arrive, align the stools, and place his hopes on children who will trample them, and then redeem them by accident. This is what education looks like from the outside. From the inside, it looks like a boy who has found a better stick. You step into the cool of a colonnade that tidies the street's thoughts. Columns space the air into sensible portions. The roof instructs rain where to go and takes compliments modestly. A stray dog pads along, decides your mission is compatible with his own, and escorts you for 20 paces before remembering he is sovereign. You thank him with the courtesy owed to monarchs. A corner shrine shows a smoky ceiling and 2 snakes whose green has learned to be elegant in low light. Grain in the dish sits like a generous sentence, not too long, not too short. The threshold bears the polish of knees that have remembered gratitude at inconvenient hours. You nod, which is the traveler's version of genuflection, and carry the calm away without guilt. At the next corner, a barber leans a mirror into brightness and admires the day's face as if he had made it. Towels hang folded into obedience. A razor gleams with the discretion of a politician's promise and will, unusually for promises. Keep cutting straight. He whistles a tune with 3 notes because only 3 are necessary. Music that tries harder often succeeds less. You pass a wall where someone has drawn a boat with bold lines. The oars are askew, the sail a triangle too perfect for wind, and the hull a dream with edges. The drawing floats towards a corner and will never arrive. You like it better for that. Arrival is so often a disappointment. Sailing across plaster or bay almost never is. The form opens in a clean square of patience. Statues keep their profiles. Paving stones declare neutrality. The East invents colors it forgot it knew. You walk its long side with the casual reverence, due to rooms that have seen better arguments than yours. A seller of ink unlatches his shutter. A coppersmith lifts a bolt and decides to be honest for another day. You approve of his ambition. The lamp, finally needless, gives one last small glory and retires in your hand. You tuck it away like a letter answered. Night has kept its part. Morning begins to speak in that gentle voice it uses before the market arrives. You do not interrupt. Good manners are cheap and rare. It's foolish not to spend them. The town's pulse begins to lift, not by much, only enough to persuade bread to rise and people to remember their names. You walk a lane that performs the decent trick of smelling of water, even when none is in sight. A fountain explains why. Lionhead, wide basin, familiar patience. 2 cups rest on the rim, a taller one inside a shorter, like a promise keeping its younger brother. A child brings a pitcher with both hands and frowns at gravity. Gravity forgives him this once. A modest shop displays tablets and styluses, each set straight as if auditioning for good sentences. The owner tidies a stack and resists the urge to retidy it. Wisdom is mainly achieved by not retidying things that are already fine. A small bottle of lampblack tips a little in its cradle and does not spill, because restraint can be taught even to ink. Opposite, a woman opens a shutter on a household altar and talks to her mother's shade about nothing of consequence. The price of greens, a neighbor's cough, the way pigeons have become brazen. The shade answers in the medium of calm. She nods and feels improved without admitting it. Altars earn their keep in these exchanges, not in grand gestures that frighten the cat. A leather worker lays a strap across a last and tests a buckle with the skepticism of a craftsman who has witnessed failings. The buckle behaves. He allows himself the luxury of approval. In the corner, a jar of tacks waits with the prickly optimism of those who hold things together and are seldom thanked. You resolve to thank a nail today, and the thought alone makes you a better citizen. A small square draws you with the humility of well-proportioned stone. A bench stands precisely where the breeze turns. You sit, and the breeze performs its contract. A fig seller arranges fruit into a logic that would impress philosophers. Ripest to the right, second best to the left, a few rescued from disaster in the middle with a price that forgives their history. She smiles when a boy points at the wrong one and gives him the right one anyway. Commerce is more attractive when it behaves like this. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Then return to what the square is doing, making quiet a public service. A street beyond shows morning faces that have learned to be kind before coffee. A porter shuffles under a load and accepts a door held by a stranger. The stranger accepts thanks and manages not to dramatize it. Such exchanges oil the day better than expensive prayers. A girl ties her sandal, fails, tries again, and wins. The sandal, admirable in defeat, pretends it intended to comply all along. You skirt a villa where the peristyle holds water that has decided to act like sky. A gardener lifts a pot with the care one gives to an irritable god. He has the hands of men who own many small victories and advertise none. Along the wall, a fresco of ivy pretends to be ivy and succeeds at being shade. Deception in good causes is always forgiven by architecture. You return at last to a corner you know, the dog behind the shutter, the laurel thread tapping, the door that wears its handprints like commendations. The watchman from earlier crosses the end of the street, nods, and keeps his step economical. The city agrees with itself, and more importantly, with you. Morning has the good grace to arrive as if it had been invited. The mountain remains a fact. The bay rehearses brightness without rushing. You carry your lamp unlit, the way one carries a memory that has learned to be quiet. The knight bows out of the scene but not out of the story. You go on, prepared to be ordinary, which is the highest compliment one can pay the day. The form wakes as if turning its head on a good pillow. Stalls arrive by degrees, a barrow nudged to its square, a cloth shaken. Once, a purse untied. The paving keeps its temper while feet remember where they meant to go. Columns take the first color of morning and behave like older brothers, calm, slightly amused, in no hurry to be clever. A lad with a broom draws a path for customers who do not yet exist. His line is straight enough to make geometry feel redundant. At the fountain by the law court, a woman tips a jug, obtains the sound she prefers, and stops. Her child, sleepy and persuaded into sandals, counts pigeons as if the republic depended on accuracy. A baker's boy trots past with a tray propped to his shoulder, loaves rocking like small planets in orderly orbits. One heel drops. A dog considers citizenship. The boy is faster. He wins without gloating. Bread teaches humility more efficiently than sermons. Along the north edge, the money changer hangs his scale with the courtesy of a host setting chairs. The pans meet, disagree, and then find a compromise any statesman would envy. He nods, once for balance, once for luck, and notes a figure in chalk. Chalk understands discretion. The coppersmith lifts his shutter and rehearses honesty by polishing a basin as if truth lived in brass. Truth does not live there, but brass improves the rumor of it. A stall of figs appears under an awning, green and purple set out like well-behaved jewels. The seller taps one softly and listens to its reply. Satisfied, she puts it in a place of honor as if promoting a soldier. Beside her, a jar of honey sits with the patience of saints and slightly better prospects. Customers admire without touching. Good manners can be taught to eyes if you start early. You wander to the basilica, where voices once argued law into shape. The air still holds a faint ghost of eloquence. The walls remember how to stand up straight in the presence of logic. A clerk crosses the floor with a wax tablet and a stylus performing the part of scepter and pen. He looks too young to govern anything, and will end the day having governed quite a lot. Government done properly is mostly lists and decency. Beyond, a lane takes you to a row of small workshops that smell of competence, leather, wood, oil, a reminder of vinegar where pickles consider their fate. A sandal maker sets out his last like a family portrait. A joiner tests a hinge and believes in it just enough to stop testing. A woman with thread through her teeth knots the end and makes peace with the day. No trumpets attend. The gods keep out of the way when people are busy doing civilization. A breathing reset gathers in a pocket of shade beside a painted wall where ivy climbs towards an imaginary pergola. A bench knows exactly where your back needs to lean. You sit as if you have rehearsed this with the city, which you have, in other lives and better shoes. Further on, a small shrine opens its niche to the street. Two painted snakes keep their courteous watch. The dish before them holds grain, a coin, a wilted petal that refuses to be awkward about its age. A boy touches the wall with two fingers in the manner of men who will later swear oaths competently. His father says nothing, which is the right liturgy. The boy looks taller as they go. At the edge of the form, a notice in red letters praises a candidate for his drains, his fairness, and his dislike of bribery. So firm, it sounds rehearsed. Below the letters, someone has added, in a smaller hand, and his mother's bread. You prefer the second endorsement. Bread is harder to fake. A mule twitches an ear as if agreeing. The mule has seen more magistrates than it cares to count and remains loyal only to water. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Make the decision with whatever part of your mind is still awake. The sleeping part will forgive you gladly. You take a last circuit of the square before the noise arrives in full. The mountain keeps its patient outline. The bay begins to practice brightness in slivers. A cart creaks into place and declares the market open without ceremony. The city manages the trick of being industrious and unhurried at once. You practice the same trick and pass as a local. A quieter street leads towards gardens where vines lift their arms along trellises and fig leaves attempt to look serious. Dew writes soft arguments on the soil and wins most of them. A gardener opens his hut, inspects a coil of string as if it might have learnt vices overnight, and puts it back with a nod. On a shelf, seed packets lie in cloth wraps tied like little promises, barley, beans, mustard, each with a future that will surprise no one and please everyone. A row of hives sits under the eaves, box-lidded, steady. Bees warm themselves into the notion of labor with admirable restraint. The keeper watches their doorway as if it were a stage, and they, actors, late for their cue. He is not anxious. He knows bees arrive exactly when nectar explains itself. A pod of last year's honey stands near his foot, lid sealed with wax and a circle of thread. It looks like a sun kept from emergencies. Sensible households keep a weather of sweetness about them. Down a lane, a perfumer opens a room the size of a good cupboard and twice as dignified. Small bottles line the shelf with the quiet vanity of things that can be spilled. He checks his press, tests a stopper, and warms oil in a shallow pan until it begins to talk. Laurel, myrtle, and a careful sliver of rose take the hint. The air writes a sentence that makes arguments impossible for 30 paces in any direction. If treaties were drafted here, wars would fail from boredom. A breezy reset meets you beneath an arch where the shade pools like water and returns your breath folded and ironed. A painted dolphin swims along the wall with lifelong confidence, pleased to be aquatic on plaster and unwilling to hear criticism. The bats begin to think of opening. An attendant rattles a key once, decides against noise, and softens the gesture. Inside, the frigidarium is a stone letter to the skin, plain, cool, uncompromising. The tepidarium carries a gentle heat, as if the room remembered a story it will tell later. Benches wear the polish of many good conversations, and some unwise ones improved in the retelling. A jar of oil waits, where hands know to find it. The hypocaust breathes underfoot with the discretion of a household secret everyone politely shares. In a side court, a boy mends a net for a father who will pretend not to be moved. The needle moves like a thought that has decided to be helpful. Each knot ties a hole into usefulness. Absence becomes tool, which is as near to magic as the city permits. A dog watches with the professional interest of creatures who own the job title assistant and receive payment in crumbs. Opposite, a scribe copies a letter at a table made for arguing with paper. He writes slowly, the way doctors ought to talk. To my sister, he begins, and stops until the right kindness arrives. It does. He continues. The little stone weight on the corner of the sheet understands our responsibility and says nothing about it. You stand a moment in the company of sentences that will enter a house you'll never see and do a day's work you'll never claim. This is a respectable way to spend time. A villa wall shows a fresco of a garden that believes in eternity. Birds hold still without becoming stiff. Grapes hang at a level no hand would reach rudely. The painter knew shadows so well that even the sun behaves when it passes. You prefer these gardens to the proud ones. They are quiet enough to hear an apology arriving. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Or simply breathe and allow Pompeii to file the necessary paperwork on your behalf. Back towards the street, a vendor of olives cracks his stall open like a chest. 2 jars, bitter and bold, mellow and persuasive, wait behind a screen of clean cloth. He spears one, tastes, and decides to be generous with brine today. Generosity is brine in most cities. The trick is to spread it fairly. He will. The mountain shoulder keeps the same wise line. The bay toys with brightness and keeps it. Children begin to test the day with voices that do not yet turn into arguments. You drift onwards, practiced in the art of belonging without claiming, which is the only proper skill for a guest of dawn. Towards the south gate, the road performs its finest manners. Stones level, ruts honest, drains that would make any candidate for office preen. Tombs stand along the verge, steadfast biographies in stone. Hands clasped, baskets carved, ship underway, names cut with a severity that still manages tenderness. You read too quietly and feel improved. The living and the dead share this land without fuss, which is the most civil arrangement available. Beyond the walls, small plots dress themselves, beans straight out as promises, vines confident, a rogue poppy practicing scandal and failing. A farmer lifts a yoke with the authority of men who persuade weight instead of fighting it. He glances at the sky and decides the weather will mind its manners. The ox agrees by doing nothing dramatic. Good omens, in truth, are just competent animals. Back through the gate, a lane throws you into the harbor's arithmetic. Ropes explain their logic to bollards. Boats pretend they have always been here. A fishing crew slides ashore with the relief of men whose plan survived contact with fish. They count quietly, then stop, because numbers have conceded the point. A boy with a tally slate writes like someone being watched by Neptune and a schoolmaster. He is. A warehouse yawns, tidy even in fatigue. Amphora with dipped marks, read mats rolled like strategies. A chalk list that refuses to be embarrassed by its spelling. A clerk touches each mark with the end of his stylus as if blessing them into obedience. Commerce, when well raised, says grace and then eats. A cool reset catches you beneath a colonnade where the air slows enough for your pulse to copy it. A gull writes a clumsy line overhead and edits itself into silence. The sea keeps its counsel, which is more than you can say for most seas once the day warms. On the quay, a rope maker twists fibers into loyalty. He hums under his breath and sets his weight like a judge. The rope forms in his hands with the gratitude of things that know they will be useful. He lays the coil down like a sleeping serpent and smiles, because even serpents can serve the common good if persuaded by craft. Nearby, a stall sets out cups and a jar of vinegar for men who require a bracing argument with themselves before breakfast. The vendor wipes the rims with more care than some poets give to metaphors. He will sell cheerfully to everyone and remember no one's debts until they ask him to. Trust is cheaper than bookkeeping and twice as quick. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you, or not. The sea will continue to breathe either way, and you may borrow its rhythm free of charge. Up from the harbor, a street returns you to neighborhood scale, door lintels with handprints, thresholds with tiny mosaics, shutters that have learnt the morning's hinge. A woman lowers a basket by cord, receives bread, sends coins, retrieves a blessing neither party names. The whole exchange lasts 3 heartbeats and repairs a small hole in the world. You pause by a wall where someone has scratched a boat heading for the corner. The sail is too perfect, the oars too many, the ambition exactly right. You like the drawing because it refuses to be corrected. Then you go on, the way sensible people go on, upright, unhurried, more grateful than they admit, and perfectly willing to let the day believe it has invented you. The eastern edge lifts another shade, and the town adjusts its shirt collar. A porter sets down his load and tests a strap with the expression of a man who distrusts gravity in principle, but accepts it in practice. A woman draws water and tilts the jug until the sound settles into something she approves of. The lion's mouth obliges. Pigeons arrange themselves on a cornice as if auditioning for a coin. You walk lightly, and the stone takes your footfall as a compliment rather than a complaint. A cook shop opens its throat to the street. On the counter, round jars nest in stone hollows, each with a scent that can find your hunger even if you mislay it. Barley porridge breathes patience. A stew has the moral character of yesterday improved. Bread breaks with a crack that seems to forgive everyone. A boy counts cups and loses his place, which is believable mathematics at this hour. He hides a smile when his mother finds the lost number. It was behind the ladle all along, as numbers so often are. You pass a house where the atrium holds a patient square of sky and the impluvium copies it with the confidence of a good pupil. On the wall, masks grin without malice. A painted garden lends an extra leaf to the real fig. The lararium keeps ash tidy as a ledger. The little larks dance without moving. A cat edges along a sill with the air of a magistrate prepared to forgive minor civic offenses. It blinks at you, which passes for a decree. A narrow lane draws a draft that cools the pulse and persuades thought to stop performing. A basket lowers from a window by cord and climbs again with bread inside. Coin sent back down wrapped in a leaf. Nobody says thank you aloud. Thank you is implied by the neatness. The cord squeaks once and remembers to be quiet. It has earned its place in the household the way all good servants do, by doing the obvious beautifully. You fall into step with a pair of old men who have perfected the art of walking as argument. They praise a street repair that didn't collapse in rain, deplore an awning that did, and marvel at a new mule as if it were a comet. Their conclusion, stated twice and sincerely, is that Pompeii is tolerable if people will stick to their jobs and the sky minds its manners. Sensible policy. The sky is listening. Behind a shutter, a child recites a line and is corrected by a patient mother who knows that patience is faster than scolding. The child tries again and nails the verb to the right post. There's a small cheer you cannot hear. The city registers it anyway and adds a feather to a hat no one sees. Writing and bread. The town keeps them both warm. A corner shrine to the crossing spirits shows a smudge of fresh smoke, 2 snakes facing, and a dish with yesterday's grain. Someone has set a single fig leaf there, green as hope, veined as an old hand. The door opposite wears handprints at latch height, polished where 100 homecomings have landed. You touch the wood with 2 fingers. It is a good liturgy for guests. You drift back towards the forum by a long arc of quiet street. The lamps look faintly embarrassed now, like elderly uncles who have told their stories and are content to be furniture. You thank yours without words and let it rest. The mountain keeps its profile. The bay practices brightness, then thinks better of being obvious. You approve. A city should enter its morning the way a well-bred person enters a room, seen, not announced. Market voices begin to warm like hands. A stall shakes out cloth and pins corners as if anchoring weather. Figs form a small senate, purple, green, and the undecided. A fishmonger lifts the lid of a basket and reveals silver bodies convinced they are still water. He lays them in a discipline of diagonal lines. His knife clears its throat and behaves. A girl reaches, is corrected. The correction is a kindly finger tapped upon her wrist. She learns scale and salt in one lesson. By the basilica, two clerks compare tablets. One grimaces at his own figures and rubs them smooth with the flat of his stylus. The other waits, a benevolent creditor to arithmetic. They agree upon a truer number and look nobler for it. Justice often begins with tidied totals and ends with hope. The basilica likes to be useful. It approves of sums that do not swagger. You step into a portico where pillars queue like patient giants. Between them, the air is calmer than any argument, and the floor keeps its promise of evenness. A carpenter hurries through with a beam on his shoulder and the unconcern of a man used to solving oblong problems with square tools. He nods at you because your existence does not hinder the beam. The beam nods because it is civil. A small perfumer opens shutters as carefully as most people open letters. Bottles wink along a shelf. Laurel, myrtle, rose that remembers being wild, resin that admits it would set fire to stories if asked. He warms oil in a dish until it speaks quietly. The room learns a sentence and repeats it without error. For 3 breaths, the world cannot think of anything cruel to say. A cooling seam of shade collects in a court and returns your breath folded and neat. A sparrow hops close and pretends to know you. You pretend to be honored. The bird, satisfied with the exchange of courtesies, resumes its small empire among crumbs and chances. Power looks well in feathers at breakfast. You circle the thermi where an attendant unlocks with the discretion of a priest. The frigidarium holds its clear letter of coldness. The tepidarium draws a line of warmth so modest it could be mistaken for mercy. Benches wear the gloss of 1,000 conversations, each of which ended better than it began. On a shelf, a strigil lies like a crescent moon and feels important. It is. A vendor ladles olives into a cup and adds an extra without being seen. He likes to be generous when no one can accuse him of policy. His neighbor cuts bread in honest slices and butterfingers the crumbs to waiting pigeons while pretending disgust. The pigeons applaud by existing. These are the economics that matter before noon. If the pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Make no ceremony of it. Just let the habit take your sleep when you forget. You leave the square on a side street that respects shoes. Doorways open one by one, not like a parade, more like neighbors remembering they live near one another. A woman shakes a mat and the dust discovers politics, then retires. A boy runs a message with a seriousness that recommends him to unreliable gods. Even they will think twice before wasting him. A final look towards the mountain, honest, dark, a rule written across the sky. Then back to the town, which has chosen bread, gossip, and clean water as the 3 ways it prefers not to collapse. You list them silently and find yourself cheering for all 3. The hour fattens. Colors take themselves more seriously. A barber settles his chair and hangs a cloth with a flourish so tidy it counts as prayer. He turns the mirror to catch the best of the day and whistles 3 notes that do not intend to impress. A man sits, confesses nothing, and lets steel do its steadier theology. Hairs fall in a small republic at his feet. The barber votes with a brush and declares the election concluded. Across the lane, a sandal maker stitches with the patience of saints who prefer leather. He threads, pinches, pulls, and the strap becomes what straps should be. Trustworthy, unremarkable, handsomer than it boasts. A boy tries on a pair, walks 2 proud steps, and grows a year taller. Shoes collect a person and send him forward. A town that makes them well is safer than one that makes speeches. You take the slope towards the modest theater. Stone tears rest in composure. A stray echo tests the air and decides not to perform. The stage is bare and excellent. For a breath you consider addressing the city and decide to leave it to men who rehearse. The benches hold a soft coolness the sun will later amend. You borrow it and return it without fingerprints. A stallholder sets out ink and tablets, a scale for coins, a line for pens. He weighs a measure of lamp black and is honest about its mischief. A customer sniffs a bottle and is convinced by its promise of clean lines. Script persuades more people than swords in peacetime, and peacetime needs all the persuasion it can hire. A breathing reset collects under an arch, where damp stone smells faintly of wells and good intentions. The chill picks your skin one stitch at a time and leaves everything tidier. A lizard does its best to be legend on a sunless wall and fails admirably. Midway through the morning drift, a quiet reminder. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Then forget the matter. The habit will remember you. A grocer cuts cheese with a wire that sings like a hair. He wraps the wedge in a leaf that lies flatter than your conscience. Beside him, a jar of figs and honey has recruited sunlight and will not need your help to sell. A woman points and the stall obeys, which is how civilized markets work when everyone has had enough sleep. Beyond, a physician's sign shows two snakes sharing one stick and no quarrel. Inside, jars stand labeled for plants that learned Latin without boasting. Mallow for softening, poppy for persuading, vinegar for discipline, honey for friendship. He measures slowly because cures are timid animals that bolt when shouted at. The room smells like a sensible temple. You follow a lane that declines to be grand and therefore achieves it. Threshold mosaics greet the feet with dogs, vines, and the word have, as if Latin had decided to be kind. The impluvia hold their tame squares of sky. Columns yawn in their best manners. You do not knock. You walk as if you live here, which every guest should manage for at least one street per visit. A rooftop stair leads you to a page of the town that needs no ink. Tiles warm slowly. Chimneys think of smoke. The bay nicks silver off the edge of the world and pockets it. The mountain keeps its line as if a careful draftsman had insisted upon a steady hand. You lean forearms on parapet and let the city pour past your eyes. A cock crows once, recalls it is not yet emperor, and abdicates. On the roof next door, a woman spreads cloth and secures corners with small amphorae. Her fingers work with that quiet economy that makes grand gestures look wasteful. A child appears, tugs at a knot, learns it again and ties it better. Lessons in rope and patience. She'll be mayor of a household by winter if the gods respect merit. You descend to a lane where windows have opened just enough to suggest conversation. A man reads a letter aloud to a wife, who interrupts only once and only to correct a name. He nods and starts the line again, improved by precision. Private joy warms the plaster and cannot be taxed. The town senses it and feels richer. A reset pools in the shade of a fig. You stand inside it as if stepping into a cloak. The air has a green taste you cannot spell. The tongue does not complain. A beetle crosses your sandal with the insistence of a senator and is shown due respect. A dyer lifts a paddle and tests a vat the color of tempered sky. The cloth draws up its new character in a quiet negotiation. He smiles, which is as close to vanity as good work requires. The apprentice makes a face at the smell, and then remembers the smell buys bread. He turns the face into obedience. Wisdom, rented hourly, suits him. A small school uncloses itself. Benches, wax tablets, a rod that hopes to remain decorative. The master lays out verbs like tools, and the children pick them up with a seriousness that would flatter gods. A boy scrapes his tablet smooth and for a second loves beginnings. He will forget. The tablet will remember. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night your journey finds you. Or simply stand where you are and let the city do the walking. Both methods carry you. You take the long side towards a garden house, whose frescoes produce birds that would charge a fee in Rome. Grapes droop and paint more persuasively than in orchards. Leaves keep its shade that never moves. The painter made an arrangement with light and kept it faithfully. You admire contracts honored when nobody checks. A final pass along a street of trades. Cobbler, joiner, lamp seller, a stall of cheap glass that pretends not to be beautiful and fails. The glass has bubbles that look like tiny planets. The seller lies about price with the gentlest hands you've ever seen. You let him keep the lie. The glass is worth the story. The town's tempo settles into the even gait that will carry it to noon. A cart negotiates a corner with the courtesy of an uncle dancing at a wedding, careful, ridiculous, adored. A mule ears you once and forgets you. The driver calls the stones by name in a sequence that sounds like music if you are kind. You are kind. A household altar receives its second attention of the day, a pinch of flour, a splash of wine, a murmured line about keeping children honest, and roofs obedient. The lairs accept like old friends who never bring wine and always help tidy. Across the hall, a portrait wall keeps a set of faces that look serious without being solemn. An infant in paint enjoys a grape it will never finish. You approve of the arrangement. You pause where a vine climbs a lattice with the discretion of a well-brought-up guest. A bench under it knows the exact conversation two people could have here and still like one another afterwards. You sit alone and conduct both halves, which saves time and spares friends. The vine sways once and agrees. A reset breeze collects at the mouth of a lane and smells faintly of warm stone and clean water. It edits your thoughts without changing their meaning. A swallow writes a line and dots its own eye within a modest dive. You forgive the flourish. Birds are entitled to signatures. A vendor of trinkets arranges pins and beads on a cloth with military severity. He has 3 price tiers and the courage to admit it. A girl weighs a hairpin like a magistrate considering law. Her mother nods at the cheaper one, and the decision passes unanimously. Jewelry that minds budgets usually minds hair as well. If this pace helps you drift, you can subscribe so the next night journey finds you. Otherwise, let the day keep you in its pocket. It has several, and they are deep. A scribe sits at a table and drafts "To my brother" with a pause large enough to host forgiveness. He finds it, sets it down, and the ink behaves. A neighbor leans in to borrow a good word for a bad hour. The scribe provides one without a receipt. Commerce of this sort worsens no one's accounts. You thread past a baker's door where the second batch has taken to itself the right to be admired. Loaves cool on a board with a republican dignity. A hand reaches and does not take. The hand is properly Roman, self-controlled, and if necessary, bribable by a better moment. At the turning to your starting street, the laurel thread taps its plaster. The dog behind the shutter issues a sigh reserved for old friends. The mountain continues to be an excellent line. The bay rehearses brilliance and puts it away like a gem no one needs to see to be reassured. You take this as permission to be ordinary and succeed at once. The last of night has folded itself into the hems of roofs. Morning stands at the door with an expression that promises neither drama nor disappointment, just bread, work, and whatever kindness people can manage in between. You trace the same lane you began with, and it fits you better for having carried you. The paving stones accept your step as if finishing a sentence they started yesterday and enjoyed. At the fountain, you wet your fingers and bring cool to the back of your neck. The lion keeps his stream with the authority of a functionary who likes his job and therefore is not dangerous. 2 cups clink gently. A child counts them wrong and learns the right number by accident. The day is merciful that way. The thermopolium offers steam in short speeches. The proprietor lifts a ladle as a question mark and is answered with 2 fingers. You sip something honest and find it agrees with your intentions. A bell from a shrine tests its voice. Shutters rise. Sandals remember errands. The city never really slept, it only practiced being calm. You pass the bakery. The woman with flour on her arms smiles the small, tired smile of people who are useful. The oven breathes. The loaves rehearse perfection by cooling without showing off. The boy keeps count with better luck. The ledger of his forehead is spotless. He will ruin it by noon and improve the family's stories. A reset rests in the shade of a painted wall where ivy clambers towards an invented pergola. You breathe once, twice, and the air returns your breath tidier than you sent it. The trick is always the same. Give the town your hurry and take back its tempo. You look up. The mountain is a law. The bay is a promise. The houses are proof. Amphorae lie like sleeping seals. Cords know their knots. Thresholds keep the memory of hands. The little lairs insist upon a universe in which attention is the only tax. No thunder of myth, no heralds, only competence and the kind of beauty that would blush if named it. If you slept, perfect. If you stayed, thank you. I'll keep the light low for the next story.